All right, welcome to episode 12 of Open Betas with Regal and Swimfan. I am Regal.
And I am Swimfan.
Did we ever decide whether we are introducing our qualifications and stuff, or are we just gonna?
I mean, we can try it and see how it goes.
All right. I don't have anything prepared, but I guess I'll just wing it. So I am I'm just a software engineer that is currently talking about games. That's about it. Swimfan has the actual qualifications.
Just a harmless software engineer.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm a former marketing guy for various video game companies, including Activision and Riot Games. The end.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Look at that long list of accomplishments.
Yes. Huge.
We will I do want to talk about your whole, now that you're like officially retired from games, right? Basically.
I think so. Unless something miraculous happens.
Miraculous from your side or from the industry side?
Like suddenly I come up with an idea so good that I've got to make it or something like that.
Yeah. The classic, we'll find you in elevators in LA everywhere.
Yeah, no way I'm doing that again. Yeah, no more LA.
Yeah, now that we are I'm joining you there on that front pretty soon. I'm getting the heck out of here. Now that you're more or less officially retired from games, I guess we should do a retrospective podcast at some point about your journey.
Sure.
And how you ended up where you were and why.
Sure,
and,
my fascinating journey.
Yep. I mean, you ended up being kind of a big shot, right?
Yeah.
To some extent. So I think it's worth
here and there. Some people might say that, but most people wouldn't.
Well, I think that's reversed, but
okay.
We'll see. Okay, so today we're heading back to the world of games. It's going to be a little bit of a deep dive into what turned out to kind of be two completely separate systems that we kind of thought were the same thing at the beginning, but either way, we'll still talk about them.
Misunderstand each other?
Sorry?
Did we misunderstand each other?
I don't know what happened. I honestly, the last week or so has been kind of a blur, so I don't have a strong recollection of how this even got started, but here we are.
All right.
Basically, the idea we had for this podcast was to talk about hidden parameters in games. And in this specific case, the example we started with was IVs in Pokemon. Now, hidden parameters. Yeah,
and when we say hidden mechanics, just to be clear, we're talking about stuff that isn't pointed out in the game anywhere or in the official documentation anywhere. Stuff that is happening behind the scenes, or even moves or things you can do that aren't called out.
Yep. So this is more a topic about like obfuscation in games, right? And so, for example, like very few games like publish the damage formula, especially not in the game itself. Right.
Definitely not
the formula for exactly how much damage. So we're talking like JRPG here, although this applies to action games too, to a lesser extent. I think those tend to be simpler. But for like a JRPG, which is stat based, no game basically ever tells you what the damage formula is in the game. Not that they're necessarily trying to keep it a secret, but more that, we'll talk about why. But this is something that
it kind of starts to infringe on the fantasy a little bit if you're always breaking every little bit down to numbers, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think that's probably a big part of the reason they don't do it. And this also applies to systems, basically any kind of game system that's sort of obfuscated from the player in an official capacity. Things like the damage formula, things like stat growth. How, when you level up a Pokemon, you get those plus signs next to your stats. Why, how do those numbers get determined? Right?
Yeah.
Even sometimes things like, what is the actual stats of this character or this Pokemon? I mean, you'll see it right when it comes in, and maybe next time you see it, it'll be different. Basically, we're talking about why and how those systems are obfuscated and what the benefits and drawbacks are. It turns out that the original system that I thought of for this, which is IVs, individual values of Pokemon.
Individual values, right.
Yeah. So Pokemon has two like well-known stat systems. One is IVs, which is individual values, and one is EVs, not to be confused with a Pokemon EV.
Oh, okay.
Of course. EVs, the letters E and V, are effort values.
Effort values?
These are effort values.
All right.
So we can talk a little bit about what they are, but these are two systems that affect the stats of your Pokemon, which are hidden from the player. And they are kind of well known because Pokemon is sort of a long-standing, like the systems in Pokemon have not changed very much over the years. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of a long-standing thing, and a lot of people play Pokemon as a kid, and as an adult, they you kind of learn about this through osmosis, essentially, right? Even if you're not interested in competitive Pokemon.
Yeah.
Of course, you're interested in competitive Pokemon.
Oh, wait a minute, wait, hang on a second. You learn about IVs that way?
I think so. I mean, you learned about IVs, right? At some point?
I'm trying to think of when I learned about it. It might not have been until internet stuff that I actually...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Might have been in college, yeah. And I was like, what is this? Because I had no idea.
It would have to be through the internet, right? Like, I learned about it because I was playing, like, I got, like, interested in competitive Pokemon in high school. Mm-hmm. Briefly. Actually, not that briefly, but briefly.
I wonder...
so you kind of just learned it.
I wonder how it came out. I mean, I wonder if Nintendo put it out in something, or if people reverse engineered the game and figured it out.
Yeah, people did in fact reverse engineer the game, actually much earlier than you might expect. Yeah. So battle simulators were, and still are, if you're familiar with Pokemon Showdown, not sponsored by, not officially ordained by Nintendo, of course.
Okay, no, I'm not familiar.
Pokemon Showdown is the latest and most robust, but it comes from a long line of old Pokemon online battle simulators. Mm-hmm. So Pokemon Net Battle is one. There were some more that I can't remember their names. These were just actual programs. I first found out about them in 2008 or so, 2009 maybe.
And these are where you can do battles with people across the internet?
Yes.
On the Game Boy version?
So you can make... so you basically just create a team of Pokemon. Mm-hmm. You can sort of pick all these things that we're going to talk about. You can pick, you can basically create the theoretical max.
Okay, but it's not connected to the actual Game Boy game.
No, it's not connected to the game.
Just to run the numbers without having to catch the numbers.
But the reason I bring these up is that obviously to make this, you have to have already reverse engineered the Pokemon system, which I think probably happened in Gen 2. I don't think there was enough internet in Gen 1. Gen 2 came out like 1999, so probably in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, that's about the right time for this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's like when the very, very first speedruns also appeared, right? Like 2003 or something.
Early 2000s, yeah. I'm not sure exactly when, but that's when I started seeing them and hearing about them. When
the internet was a more innocent place, I suppose.
I don't think
that's true, actually. I think that's very untrue, actually.
It was a more back then. It seemed more like mysterious, frontier-like. Like you could discover. Yeah. If you just found the right website, you could discover stuff that was. Would change your life.
Yeah, understandable.
If you watch any movies, Regal, and I know you don't, but if you watch any movies, you should watch the 1990s thriller The Net with what's her name? Oh, you wouldn't know any of it. Oh yeah, Sandra Bullock. It's great.
I have heard the name Sandra Bullock. I'm aware of. I'm aware this is a human that exists.
She's a movie star, or she was more of a star in the 90s and the early 2000s. Anyway.
I'll keep it in mind.
Yeah, let's move on.
One day when I'm in a dark and solitary room.
I'll force you to watch this eventually.
Yeah, of course. When you capture me and lock me in a basement in Minecraft.
Yeah, Minecraft.
I actually totally forgot I was going to bring this up. So I wanted to throw in a hot new podcaster. What is the podcast lingo for this? like a recurring thing.
Oh, a segment?
A segment, yeah. A seg.
Okay,
Hot
a
new
seg.
seg.
All right.
So, I go back and listen to all of the episodes on, very fast speed.
Oh, you turn up
for
the
editing
speed.
purposes.
How fast?
Yeah, way up. Yeah.
How fast? I want to know.
Usually like 1.5, 1.75. Actually,
Wow.
VLC doesn't tell me. It just says faster in VLC.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. I was doing it in Audacity, but in Audacity, it also speeds up the pitch. So I can't turn it up very fast. Otherwise, I sound like chipmunks, which is kind of funny.
Too funny. But, yeah, they manage the pitch as well when they speed it up. That's nice. I guess they do that on most apps, podcast apps. Yeah. But I just am not the type that wants to do that. I guess I could see doing it with your own podcast, though.
Yeah. I mean, I dislike the sound of my own voice, which is a common thing, right? So,
yeah, by the end of this, by episode 300 or 400, you'll like the sound of your voice.
I don't know if I think it's a permanent thing, but we'll see.
No.
We'll get used to it, I'm sure. Anyway, I have a new seg idea, which is as I go back, I want to bring up certain. I want to basically add notes or correct certain things I said that were wrong. This is something I believe that should happen a lot more in life in general. So I just want to bring it up here. Not sure what to call this yet. I guess we'll start with patch notes. It could also be called a hotfix. Not certain what the right branding is. Well,
yeah, I mean, they both work.
I'm sure. Yeah. We'll start with patch notes. Hotfix is shorter, though, but there's also GDQ hotfix. I'll just start with three quick bullet points for each episode that I think of these things in. The first one is just I mispronounced someone's name in actually several previous speedruns. There's a speedrunner named PJ. This individual's last name is spelled DI space CESARE, which I in my great ignorance pronounced as Die Cesar, which is not correct.
Okay.
It's actually De Caesar. So my great apologies. I will correct this going forward.
All right.
It's PJ De Caesar.
Sorry, PJ De Caesar.
Yep. I'm a big fan of this guy, actually, although he hasn't been so active since COVID as far as marathons go. He does stream on Twitch frequently still. He runs a lot of very funny games like RoboTrek.
RoboTrek?
Good on commentary. Yeah.
Did we talk about that?
I feel like you brought it up like in the very, very beginning of this endeavor.
Robotech is the anime. RoboTrek.
RoboTrek is the quintet game.
Oh, how did I miss this? Because I loved quintet games. Yeah, we talked about it in context of that.
I'm certain that we talked about it, although maybe.
Considering how many games I got as a kid but especially rented as a kid, it's so weird to me that a lot of these, they're still like great games that I never played.
Yeah. Maybe we should do a RoboTrek playthrough at some point.
Sure.
These days. Yeah, so PJ De Caesar, my apologies. The next thing I wanted to do was the thing I wanted to add was when we're talking about feedback, one of the things I think we missed and maybe we should come back to another day is we never really talk about when it's important to respond to feedback and how we should do that.
Oh, right. Yeah. Why would we do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is true. Maybe we should never respond. But I think if you come with the idea that like at some point feedback is useful, then I think there are some cases when, at least at a company level or at an organizational level, you should respond to certain things in some fashion, right?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah. I mean, you have to in many cases.
Right. Sometimes you have to, but even when you don't, I mean, I guess from a PR perspective, you like have to, right? That's the whole point of PR. It's not like your response is like controlling the.
Oh, I thought you meant when you said organization. I thought you meant feedback from like within the company.
Oh no! I mean like, well, that too, I suppose. But
yeah, I just mean you have to.
I actually meant general feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, it's kind of it takes a lot of work and it takes some amount of bravery to like kind of wade into that and be like, yeah, we took this piece of feedback and here's why, and we didn't take any of these pieces of feedback. I don't know. Just opening that up is it's good, but it also it's good in the long run.
Yeah, I do think so. And so, but it's also, as you said, dangerous, right? I think it's something you have to kind of be very careful about, but you also have to sort of, in my opinion, I think it's important to try to keep it human, not make it sort of like a permanent PR spin, right?
Yeah.
Because at that point, you're just like putting out statements and you're sort of not responding and no one really pays attention at that point. So I think that'll be something, that's something we miss talking about. And maybe it'll be, I think there's enough there maybe for a full episode at some point in the future.
All right. All right.
And the final thing I want to add this time is when we were talking about tutorials, is it kind of struck me listening to all the examples we gave that a lot of times, in fact, I think in general this is true, and I never really thought about it before, is that you learn a lot more from doing something wrong than doing something right. If that makes sense. So when you perform an action and you get sort of negative feedback and you kind of get stuck, or when you fail at doing something, somehow I feel like just intuitively it makes a more permanent, more important, lasting impression on you. And I think some of the examples that were given in the video also highlight this.
Yeah, that feels right. I mean, yeah, I think there are exceptions where it's like, you have to do this complicated thing right for it to be worth it. But in a lot of cases, when they teach you stuff, I remember stuff as like, oh, all the things you've learned up to here, you think you can get through here, but actually you're going to fall, and then redo it once they teach you the thing.
Right. And I think that's one of the things we can apply better if we want to improve the tutorial experience, because I think like a lot of tutorials just have you do the quote unquote right thing. And that, I think a lot of times that ends up with people not really remembering what they did, because they're sort of just following the instructions and they're not really getting feedback other than this is what you're supposed to do. But just something to think about. That's a grain of thought that I don't want to put more thought into right now. Maybe one day.
Cool. Patch notes.
All right, back to our main topic. So we talked about hidden parameters, right? So hidden parameters, the main question there I think is why are they hidden and why are they obfuscated? What kinds of things should be and shouldn't be? Now, again, we originally thought about this in terms of IVs. So IVs and EVs are two different systems that affect the stats of Pokemon. They were invented pretty early on. Between Gens 2 and 3, the modern formula more or less settled in. 2 was in like 1999, I think, and 3 was, I think, in 2002, 2003, something like that. So they've been more or less the same for quite a while now. So IVs, the way IVs work is basically they're like inherent and decided when the Pokemon is created, whether it's caught, or really whether it's encountered in the wild, or whether it's hatched from an egg. These are like unchangeable values, and EVs are sort of a pool that you can get from battling other Pokemon. So every time you kill, not kill, there's no killing in Pokemon. Every time you
encourage them to faint.
Yes, every time you encourage the opposing Pokemon to faint, depending on which Pokemon it was, it gives you some EVs, and you're in a certain stat, and then your stats go up based on like your EV values. So it's like EV training is what they call it, where you like purposely fight certain Pokemon to increase this number.
So, and that's totally separate from like experience points and stats.
Yes,
that you're just leveling up with the Pokemon. Okay,
that's right. It is separate.
And
essentially, it's just a.
Do you have some sort? Isn't there some sort of growth multiplier as well in there that you can be different values? Okay.
Yeah, there's an item called the Macho Brace, and in the later gens, other items that like double the rate of your EV gain. But there is no way to change your
like
IV.
Some sort of innate thing, like something about the IVs or EVs, but maybe not.
Oh, maybe. There's a number of systems that I guess I could explain, but are probably not worth talking about in detail.
Okay.
Unless you want to be here for a while. But yeah,
no.
The IVs are different than most other stats because they're innate. They cannot be changed in any way, although there's a caveat there for later gens. They basically walked back a lot of these decisions. I'll point out a number of these problems, but they yeah, a lot of these decisions were eventually walked back or over the years for various reasons. But IVs are
was this like a specific designed system? It wasn't like it wasn't like considered a bug or anything. This was just like
no. This is
actually
definitely
designed in. And did they call it IVs or did fans?
I think they probably did call it IVs. Okay. I think the reason they have weird names is because they're straight transliterated from Japanese.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it comes from Nintendo or from Japanese internet, but I think they're very clearly intentionally designed, but I think they've always been on the record like talking about it. Although I think they do very little public speaking, at least on internet, on English media. So
okay,
we'll see. Anyway, as I thought about it more, IVs are kind of separate from even the problem of being hidden, because IVs, when a unit has fundamentally random values, it sort of changes what the behaviors are. But since it's our starting example, I just want to give a very basic overview of how this works.
Please.
If you'll be able to stay awake, hopefully, for the whole explanation, which I will try to do quickly. So Pokemon is a JRPG. It's a turn-based RPG. You have dudes or dudettes or they-thems, because sometimes they're magnets and they have no gender, that fight each other. They do attacks each turn. Each Pokemon does an attack towards the other Pokemon. They have HP. Attacks do a certain number of damage based on a pretty simple formula. Again, the thing about all these Pokemon systems is that, they were made in like 2000 or before 2000, right? So they were very simple, and they've sort of been kept more or less as is until present day.
Yeah, before Y2K sped everything up and made it more.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Of course. So Pokemon has basically 6 very simple stats. There are HP, attack and defense, which are physical attack and physical defense, which affect each other, and then special attack and special defense. So moves are either physical or special. You just take the defense and attack value of whichever one it is. And speed is a very linear stat where the Pokemon with a higher speed moves first in a round.
Pretty standard stuff for an RPG.
Yeah, extremely. It's like simple even by 2000 standards, right? Like I'm sure, like I feel like Final Fantasy IV probably had a more complex stat system than Pokemon.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't think so, actually.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So the way these work is IVs are a number between 0 and 31, which are randomly assigned to a Pokemon at creation. There's some ways to affect this. So when you breed, there's some inheritance that comes from breeding, etc., etc. But essentially, there's a number from 0 to 31 that's assigned randomly to the Pokemon, and this number that's assigned, this IV, just increases the stat proportionally by this number. I think it's literally just at level 100 you have an extra 0 to 31.
Okay.
You have just the IV added to your stat, and then as you're leveling up, it like scales in some way. But don't quote me on that one. I don't remember exactly.
So but the 6 stats that you mentioned all have a randomly assigned 0 to 31 IV value. Okay.
Yep.
31.
And so, this was kind of clever because of the technological implementations of the time. So this, if you look at old especially Game Boy game engineering, there's not a lot of memory on the discs. So especially things like Pokemon. This is actually where a lot of glitches come in, because there were a lot of shortcuts taken to try to make things as compact as possible. Pokemon Red, Gen 1 Pokemon in general was extremely broken because of all these shortcuts that were put in, and also it was developed, in a hurry. But
yeah, that's kind of a fun byproduct of old games, is they have to make decisions because of space.
Right. Which imagine doing that now,
Yeah, right.
180 gigabyte Modern Warfare 2 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now put that on your disk and smoke it. Actually, don't smoke it. I think that's quite dangerous.
Were you around for
this thing's on fire.
What is it? 5.3, 5.0 floppy disks? What are they? What size are they?
No, I never I did own some floppy disks, but we never had a computer that could actually take a floppy disk. So
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
I used them as toys and coasters. Actually, mostly just toys. Kind of just threw them around.
The 3.5 ones, the small ones.
Yeah.
Or 3.25. Whatever. Who cares? They're big floppy
really
disks, and they barely held anything on them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they were impressive when they were first created, probably. Actually, I don't even know if that's true.
But you could really flop them around. That's fun.
Sure can. I love flopping.
Oh.
So does Magikarp. Anyway, so each stat has a random value from 0 to 31. So one of the reasons this was sort of invented, I think, in my opinion, probably the main motivation was they wanted to give each Pokemon a sense of individuality.
Yeah.
So one of the core tenets of Pokemon is like collecting, right? And catching like a bunch of them. Well, catching Pokemon in general is sort of like the main focus in many ways, right? That's kind of what the anime is about.
For sure. Got to catch them all.
So they wanted to sort of give you some reason to catch more than one of the same Pokemon, for example. I think that's reasonable, right? So by giving each Pokemon by giving them some sort of individuality, you could look at the two Nidoran you caught, right? And this one has higher attack slightly, and this one has higher speed slightly, or whatever. Right?
Yeah, so grind up the other one.
Right. It's basically a very simple way to get you to give you some reason to catch multiple Pokemon. The other thing that kind of highlights the technological aspect is they actually used, in Gen 2 in particular, they used IVs to calculate a bunch of stuff that they didn't have the space to save. So, for example, gender is calculated based on IVs in Gen 2.
Okay. Like half of the numbers, half of the IVs are male, half are female, kind of thing.
Which is funny. So female take the lower half of the attack IV. So
oh shit.
So
females are weaker in Pokemon?
Yes. Yes.
That sucks.
Actually, I don't know if that's exactly true, but I do know females are weaker. I don't know if it exactly is the lower half, but yeah, the attack IV, the lower end of the attack IV tends to be female. So they also have to explain every time they run a Gen 2 game and a marathon, they have to be very careful in explaining why they don't want female Pokemon.
No girls.
Yeah.
Is that just for attack power, or is that for everything?
No, I think it's literally just physical attack.
And everything else?
Don't quote me on that.
Okay, all right.
Well, they basically just have to make a 50-50 distinction, right? Like they had to. Now they could have done it in a much better way, but
evenly, they just did half and half.
They basically just decided, if it's 0 to 15, it's female, and if it's 16 to 31, it's male. I believe that's how it works.
Regal, I believe that women are the stronger of the two.
What about non-binaries? Where did they lie?
This interview is over.
I see. Where were we? Okay. So
we're talking about why they did this, right?
Oh yeah. Why? So technologically, it's part of it. Shininess was also determined based on this. It's more complicated. You had to like get a specific set of values in some way. But it ended up being, they basically just used it to get the correct shininess probability.
Explain shininess for everyone.
Shininess. So starting in Gen 2, they added another cool feature to, pad out game time because lazy devs. You could get a chance, very low chance, 1 in 8,192. Starting in Gen 2, it became easier later. For basically, it's just a Pokemon that would do a little flash when it appeared, and it had a different color. So it was basically a way to get like a special version of a Pokemon. Yeah.
Cool.
Shiny hunting is a huge thing, actually. If you a lot of casual players really care about.
It's in Pokemon Go as well. And it comes, of course, from the card game. The notion of shiny foil cards being a surprise rare thing that you get in card packs. Yeah, shinies.
Oh, I didn't think about it. That makes a ton of sense, actually.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
I think so.
I never made that connection.
I didn't make that up.
It's okay. No, who's going to cross-check you? You're the expert here.
That's true.
You can just flash your badge.
Yeah, guys, it's everybody. It's true.
Flash your resume at them and tell them that they don't know anything. So I actually have a little bit of an exercise for you if you're ready for this. So what is the chance of getting a perfect Pokemon? So 31 in all IVs. Assuming that they're just distributed randomly, so you have no control over it, is 1/32 to the power of 6, which is about 1 in a billion.
Yeah, I see. Right?
Okay. If it takes 5 seconds to catch a Pokemon, so you spend 5 seconds of time catching a Pokemon, how long would it take you, would you estimate, to catch 1,073,000,000, this number, slightly over 1 billion Pokemon? 5 seconds at a time.
I don't know.
Give me a ballpark. Like, if someone tells you there's a 1 in a billion chance and you can do it 5 seconds at a time, how long would it take you to do it?
I don't know my stats.
So for example, no, you don't have to get. I just want like a general ballpark. How long? Like, do you think it's a million years? Do you think it's 1 year? Do you think it's a month? Yeah.
Oh man.
So let's say there's a slot machine, right? I put a slot machine for you. You can play the slot machine for free. You have a 1 in a billion chance of winning. You get a pull every 5 seconds.
Until when? I get 1 billion. Okay.
No, you just pull it. You pull it as much as you want. You have a 1 in a billion chance of winning, 5 seconds at a time. Right. And if you win, I give you $1 billion. Right. How long do you think it would take for you to do the billion pulls in this case?
Isn't that isn't that just 1 billion times 5 seconds?
Billion times 5 seconds. Yeah. I mean, you can do the math if you want, but I'm just curious what
I think it is. Oh man, I'm not good at this kind of. Is like jelly beans in a jar.
It's important.
Let's see. So this is how long it would take?
Yeah. 5 seconds times.
Let's say.
How long is that?
Let's say it'll take 10 million years.
10 million years. Well, you're off by a lot.
Yes. Okay. I don't know. How do you do this?
It's about 180 years. Now, that's not.
How do you get to that?
Oh, you simply multiply. So you multiply this number by 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? So you get 5 billion seconds, and then you just divide until you get to years and days. Right? So you divide by 60 to get to minutes, and then you divide by 60 to get to hours, and then you divide by 24 to get to days, and so on. But the reason I bring this up, I guess I'll go on a little tangent here. There's a book, I think, that kind of points to a lot of these problems. It's called Innumeracy. It's kind of well known in like the business circles, I think.
Sounds familiar, but I don't know it.
Yeah, a lot of like business, alpha business-minded people kind of
not open beta business-minded people.
Yeah, on a beta process. But I think it's important because there's a lot of difficulty, I think, for people to think about things probabilistically. I think it's important to kind of learn basic tools, or at least like recognize them and kind of think about them, to think about rarity and how difficult it is to do something. So for example, like
we both, we being humans, both aren't able to picture probability very well in terms of we think things are more likely to happen generally than even when we're told they're not. And also, there's something else. It'll come to me. Keep going.
One of the things that happens is when people see numbers, they often get scared, and I guess scared is not the right word, but a lot of the first reactions is sort of try to find a way away from the numbers. So you end up defaulting to statements like, well, it's just a crapshoot anyway. Or
yeah, that's what I did when you asked me the little exercise. I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom.
Yeah, which is fine. But I do think over time it can cause some problems in society with things like, oh, I don't know, vaccine prevention rates. Right?
Yeah, people don't. Yeah,
right. When people aren't able to think about the numbers at all and estimate things, things like vaccine prevention rates become a big topic because they're like, they're not effective, they are effective, and it's like, well,
right. And the other thing was the bigger numbers get when they're into the millions, and especially the billions, people have a really hard time. It's just very hard for our brains to picture it, so we falter over the possibilities, but probabilities rather.
Okay, well, so basically, I think they essentially picked this number because they're like, okay, this is big enough. There's, if people want to grind for the perfect Pokemon, they can grind forever. Beautiful game design. Let's go have dinner. This is a joke, by the way. This is the classic lazy devs joke. Yeah, let's just throw some probability at it and they'll grind forever. That's not necessarily true. But essentially, this system is also hidden. So that's why this system existed. It kind of it neatly patches over some technological limitations, right, of Gen 2, and to some extent Gen 3, but I think it became much better at that point. And it also added this ability to have Pokemon be individual.
Yeah, which makes
all Pokemon
sense.
Are different than each other. Yeah. However, they are also hidden, which is kind of the other topic. So there was really no way to know from playing the game unless you try to reverse engineer it. You can only get some kind of sense that not all Pokemon are the same. So you could look at two Pokemon of the same level that you caught, and you could see that they have different stats.
Yeah, or if you're trading with a friend, you might see that too.
Exactly. Now, so you can also figure out that EVs exist by comparing a Pokemon that you've been training with a wild Pokemon of the same level that you just caught, and you could see that your trained Pokemon has higher stats, right? EVs are the ones that sort of that go up as you kill stuff, as you convince other Pokemon to faint.
Yeah, meaning you want to start them at low level as possible, beginning evolution.
That is the general idea. I mean, you could also just grind for them at a later time, because it's pretty rare that you hit like level 100. But anyway, I think they were more or less like a very, very simplistic way to achieve all these goals. Right? It's like there's like a little tiny bit of individuality in Pokemon that remains, that like you can kind of see and sort of get a general feel for, but they at no point were they ever really explained in any way. Sometimes in very vague terms through NPCs, but otherwise just not acknowledged at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, certainly, like I said, never heard of it until internet time.
Yeah. And now here's the thing, though. As soon as the internet came out, people really delved into this, right? This got figured out, like I said, like very early on into like game.
Yeah, that is something the internet is good for, is nerds reverse engineering games. Right.
Which is, of course, the greatest pastime.
Yeah, which is where we've really reached the end of art. So that's what everyone should be doing.
Yes. My favorite discussion of all time, are video games art?
Yeah, big time.
What a wonderful and worthwhile argument to have.
Shooting a bunch of people in the face is a form of art.
Well, movies are art, right?
Yeah, they do that in movies.
Yep. Yep. Anyway, so they continue to basically not acknowledge this until it's not like they try to hide it, but in the games themselves, they sort of purposely didn't tell you anything about them over time. So as the games went on, there was more and more tutorial type thing, because in Gen 1 and to some extent Gen 2 and Gen 3, they sort of just drop you in the game, right? You just like
you
just go.
You learn by doing.
Over time, they added more and more tutorials, but these systems are, I guess, it was probably because they're like quote unquote advanced, but in any case, they rarely acknowledge that they existed, only in very basic, in very basic ways. So even in the later gens, you can never see your IVs until the end game or not at all. For a while, they would only give you general ranges. Like you could go to a NPC that would check your IVs, but they would not tell you the number. They would only tell you if it was very good or not so good or the best or so on.
Right. You don't even know what you have exactly. You know the ranges. Okay.
Yeah, and that seems intentional. And I think there's some good reasons for that that I personally would get affected by. But eventually, I think they sort of gave up, and nowadays, in the last 2 gens, they just let you see the number because I think they
in the end game, just like here it is. Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
So when you were playing Pokemon, did you fuck with this stuff?
Yeah, I did. I was sort of a elitist nerd in my high school days, so pretty much as soon as I found out about this, I started playing Pokemon with this in mind. And also, well, yeah, to some extent. And I think the joy of like beating the story of Pokemon like bounced pretty quickly once I got old enough, like into the college years. And in college, I did a lot of breeding and Pokemon collection. In Gen 6.
Right. Yeah. In the later games, you can breed them, and that's how you get the very best type, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And they made it much easier in Gens 5 and 6. I don't know if I think it is 5, but especially 6. I think 5 and 6 are about the times when I got into breeding, and that's when they made it easy enough so that it could become like a normal activity for people.
Okay. Yeah. I got enough of that in Final Fantasy with the Chocobo breeding. Speaking of hidden mechanics.
Chocobo breeding exists in Final Fantasy 14.
Cool.
Yep. You can live out your Chocobo breeding dreams.
Yeah. I mean, I like all the different colors.
They have that in Pokemon too. They added systems later on where basically in addition to just the stats, they try to give some Pokemon like patterns and stuff.
Oh, cool. I like that because then it's like more individual to you.
Yeah, I think that's better. A theme, as we'll talk more about Pokemon, is that like I really feel like they're hanging on way too much to sort of the classic systems and refusing to change them. There are some technical reasons for that because they do want to make it so that you can like transfer your Pokemon to every new game. Like some people have played every Pokemon game with the same Pokemon because you can trade it to the future games, but like I don't think that's I really feel there is a need for innovation in the Pokemon space because
which might require them not to allow that anymore for one.
Like I don't even think that's true, but it is kind of true to some extent. But and I'm not the only one that complains about this, but I think a lot of these systems like IVs have become very outdated and no longer really serve their purpose.
Yeah, I mean,
as much as they did in the past.
20, 30 years.
Yeah, only 30 years.
25.
But before we delve more into that, let's talk about similar hidden mechanics in other games and how they sort of affect other games and where their goals are.
Yeah. Oh, and also I want to mention before we jump into this, there are at least some of the examples I'm going to give are some hidden mechanics are bugs, essentially. There's that kind of hidden mechanic, like, cheat codes that didn't, or ways of doing things that weren't intended or whatever. But for the most part, we're talking about stuff that was intended, right?
Right.
That's all.
Okay, cool. Let's start with the thing that's closest to Pokemon, which is other RPGs, specifically JRPGs.
Yeah.
Right. In most of these games, there's like I can't really even think of an example of where in the game they tell you like how stat growth works. It has to be like a very specific type of game
Yeah, maybe some in which you have like very low stats and you make some decisions.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think we'll talk about this later, but I think there's a lot of pretty good reasons for why you don't need to tell the player this stuff, as long as the systems are there to sort of explain it. But as far, and I haven't really played JRPGs in many years, although I have played a couple that are like more or less this way, but definitely not up to date on what the cutting edge of JRPG technology is, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, me neither. I'm several years out of date.
Yeah. What was the last JRPG you was memorable?
I know I played Bravely Default and Bravely Second, and what was the other one by that company?
Bravely Third.
No, it was not related, but it's one that they're doing a bunch
Cowardly Third.
Yeah, they're doing some remakes of Kill la Kill, like, which was a popular.
Oh, okay.
There was a popular RPG of it, and I believe they're redoing it in this style. Oh, what was it called? I'll think of it. But yeah, I've played some semi recently. I played like The Last Dragon Warrior and Last Final Fantasy, but I'm not as thorough as I used to be.
Yeah,
and as far as I can tell, that stuff is all, for the most part, the same. I mean, other than like Western style RPGs, like skill point type stuff. But yeah, I mean,
I guess that's true.
What's that?
I guess that's true. A lot of RPGs have adopted system where you can like assign your skill points, right?
Yes.
You can sort of choose where to put them. Yeah,
and so you know where it's coming from. You may not know exactly like the damage calculation or whatever, but sometimes you do. Like, doesn't Diablo get down to that level of detail? Like, here's your base damage and here's all the percentages and it all adds up.
Yeah. We'll talk about sort of competitive games and like multiplayer games a little later, because I think the dynamic changes a lot when you're competitive. Right?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
But yeah, I think one of the things that actually annoys me about like skill point assignment games is when because at that point they're making you make a decision, right? I think one of the neat things about the Pokemon system and other sort of passive systems is that you don't have to make such a decision. It's out of your control as far as you know. So you're essentially able, you don't have to think about it, right? You can sort of just look at the outcome of your actions and sort of make determinations based on that. When they make me assign skill points.
So in that example, that's like simple JRPGs, right? Like where leveling up, the numbers go up, but you don't really understand anything else more complicated than that. You just get more powerful.
And the thing is, it's true that you don't understand anything more complicated, but when they make me assign skill points, all of a sudden, I feel like now I need more information about what I'm doing here. Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the skill tree decision paralysis especially when you can look ahead to everything else on the skill tree. It's like, all right, I guess I'm going to try to figure out what I think is good, or more likely I'm going to go online and see like, all right, what are these like in the end game or whatever. If you're not into just trying something and seeing how it goes.
Right, exactly. And different players have different sort of relationship with these kind of systems. Some players just want more freedom to do whatever they want. But I think in general, people do feel a sort of decision paralysis when they're faced with a decision. So for me, when you make me assign skill points, Shin Megami Tensei does this. I guess that counts as a JRPG. You have assigned skill points, but so obviously there are some stats that you can more or less guess what they do, like attack, right? HP. But then there are stats like luck. Luck is sort of the biggest problem with this sort of system, right?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to know whether I put skill points into luck?
Right. Luck is a really hard decision in a lot of games where it's like, what the hell does this do? And often it's just like it raises your crit rate and maybe has other effects, but
you can make some kind of educated guess, right? But
yeah, it's not the same as
overall. I think that's just an example where it's just like when you one of the reasons to obfuscate the systems, like in Pokemon, is so that you kind of don't bounce your players by making them feel like they need to understand something, right? By taking it out of their hands.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I brought this up before. All game developers always talk about one of the core things about design they talk about anyway is that games are interesting when you give people interesting decisions. And what you're saying is no, this is too many. This is too much. This is perhaps it's not an interesting decision. It's an overwhelming decision.
Right.
And it removes you from the flow of the game so much if you are like, well, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
I think there's two parts to that. One is sort of the look ahead problem, right? When you have the giant skill tree where it's like, okay, you feel overwhelmed because the decision might be interesting, but there's too much uncertainty between where you are now and where you think you want to go.
Yeah.
Right? There are ways around this, but when there's too much information all at the beginning and you don't even see the rewards of that information, that causes a lot of decision paralysis. The other one is when there's not enough information about what you should do, which is kind of the luck example, right? If you don't tell the player what luck does, they kind of feel, I feel this quite often. I just kind of stare at it and be like, so my choices are, I can just, turn off my brain and pick one at random, or I can try to guess what luck does, or I can, search around in the in-game menus for information about what luck does, which I probably won't find, or I can go online, right? And
yeah, I mean,
none of those three options feel. I mean, the first one is fine, but I don't think asking the player to just turn out their brain and pick randomly is a good option, because at that point, why don't you just
it removes luck as an actual choice you would make in the normal flow of you playing the game, and if you have to consult the internet, it changes it. That takes
the player out of the game, and they might never go back, right?
Yep.
It's not a game they're already committed to playing.
Yeah, luck. Luck is interesting. There was a stat in Earthbound called Guts that was kind of similar. It was sort of mysterious.
There's a lot of these classic stats, right? There's luck, things that are like luck. There's agi, right? Agi is always generally quite mysterious. Intelligence can be
agi is like dexterity mostly, usually, isn't it? Like chance to hit or chance to dodge.
Right. Maybe. You would think so, right? But what if it's a game where there is no missing, which is kind of a lot of modern games, right? Then what does it do?
I don't know.
And of course, we're not even getting into the point where you're trying to make the most optimal decision, which is a whole nother layer here, right? Because then you have to what is the optimal amount of crit chance and so on and so forth. But whole other can of worms. But even just having the option there, I think. Yeah, the point is that it is important to hide some information that's not necessary. Basically, I guess another way to put it is give players the least amount of information, only the need to know information, so they can go and have fun in the game, right?
Yeah.
Not be thinking about
50 steps ahead.
Yeah.
Although some freaks really get a charge out of that, planning that way ahead and getting it all perfect.
I do too, but only in games I'm really committed to, right? I think for players like me, one of the things I have to remember is that I also sometimes just open up a bunch of games and just try them, and I bounce off them pretty quickly, right? Even though I'm more of a, I play game, if I like a game, I play it for a long time, and I sort of stick with them, right? And kind of try to learn other systems. I don't do that for every game I play, right? So it's important to remember that you can't, even if you tailor your game to that audience, not every player that does that is going to like your game in particular, right? You do need to still have a quality experience and not just bounce people.
Yep.
Early on. Okay. So in RPGs, the expectation generally, I feel like, is that you can kind of learn through trial and error. And also, the other thing that's also true in Pokemon is that levels are more important than stats in most combat situations. Where
yeah, basically the more complicated you get, the more the stats are, but the more simpler the RPG, it's just kind of, if you make them your levels go up, if you grind for levels, you're gonna make it.
Right, exactly. And there's a bunch of base expectations that are generally fulfilled, which is that like, as you get to a certain area, it'll be like an appropriate level that you've reached for having played normally up to that point or whatever, right? As in you did not speed run up to that point. Your things are generally, the level that the enemies are generally indicates that's the level you should be to try to defeat them.
Yeah, you're basically fighting everything you run into.
Right. So, and I feel like honestly, that stuff is probably worked out to a science in many cases. Like sort of the progression pace, the difficulty scaling of the encounters and stuff. I feel like games are quite good at that now, to a point where it feels almost formulaic in some cases.
I always I didn't like it when RPGs or other games scale the levels of the enemies everywhere. So,
oh yeah,
like I want to go back to zone 1, the first area, and just kill everyone with my Excalibur or whatever.
Yeah,
one hit everything. One hit a bunch of rabbits.
Yep, MMOs do this. Final Fantasy XIV does this to a lesser extent, only in certain content, but Guild Wars did this everywhere for a while, and I hated it. It was one of my
they changed
favorite.
It afterwards?
I think that they changed it eventually, yeah.
Yeah, where's my Power Fantasy? When's my
Power Fantasy is
endgame fantasy? What was that? What was the phrase?
I don't know. You're on your own in this one.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, they're in an MMO, especially. I think there are like practical reasons why I think it's a bad idea. So, for example, if you're leveling a gathering profession type thing, like a crafting profession, you go back. One of the common themes is like, you go back to the beginnings. I became a max level. Now I want to go try professions. I became a level 1 miner. Now I go back to the first zone and do all the level 1 mining nodes. Right.
Yep.
Now if you're scaled down and you're just like, well, this just sucks, right? Like I'm supposed to, I'm not here to fight, like do the content again at level. I'm just here to do other stuff.
Oh, yeah, right.
I don't want to just
that whole
fight.
Option of getting to click on nodes.
Right. There's also more problems like you're no longer able to carry your friends through dungeons, right? If you have casual friends. So, depending on how scaling works, sometimes you still can just because it's not that hard, but it's sort of, there's options that are closed because you're trying to force players to only experience content the intended way, right? Which I don't.
Yeah. And they've gotten better at scaling stuff, especially with like whole parties with different levels, making it so it's still playable in games, than at least more so than they used to be, but I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's MMOs are, whenever you start adding so many different multiplayer factors, it becomes a hard problem, right? Because you have so many opposing desires pulling in different directions. But I do agree with you that this is another thing that a lot of ROM hacks do, is like, in order to make the game harder, we're just going to have the level of the enemy scale with you no matter what level you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's, I guess, a easy thing you can do.
Yeah, it is very easy, but I find this similarly annoying just because you're sort of like artificially just forcing the player to play the quote-unquote intended way, right?
And it is frustrating, especially for like if you're like, think about why you're returning, and especially in that case, like why you're returning to another zone, like why, in what in what scenario would you want to play it a second time at level? I just don't get it.
The thing some people want to do is they want to sort of go to some place they haven't been and sort of experience it as a new character or as a first-time character, right? So for example, in WoW, you can go to you don't visit every zone when you're leveling. You like pick from a certain set of them, right, that you want to go through. And if you want to be on the same character but go through an older zone to do like low level questing, you can't do it at the intended level. I think you can now, but you know, in the past you couldn't just do it at the intended level. You kind of just one shot everything.
Huh, wow.
But I feel like that's so rare that people want to do that, you know? And
I don't know.
if people want to do that, you can just add a button that allows people to do that, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I think the main other benefit, I think I said a little bit, is that you sort of you force people to experience it at least once. So for example, you don't allow people to bring in their high level friends and be like, I don't want to play, I just want to hit end game, come carry me through all the early game content on your strong character, I'm just going to AFK or whatever, right? And you say, well, you can't do that, we want you to experience the game, which is like, I mean, I don't know, like should you really be trying to force those people to experience the game? I mean, I can see that there are some people who would appreciate it, but
however you want to play, just do it.
Yeah. There is some level of like, you know, not giving players the option means that players that may have been pressured into doing the other option or may have enjoyed the slower option without realizing it, right, now get to see it. But
that's true.
I do think in this case the cost is great, much greater than the benefit. But that's just me. Maybe I don't think it's just me. I mean, they did change the system in Guild Wars, I think, so it wasn't just me. Okay, so that's JRPGs.
Yeah. I guess we
talked about MMOs for the last half of that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else in there, and it's just sort of like, you know, damage rolls and level rolls.
Yeah.
Have hidden properties, and you know, all your items. Well, those aren't usually hidden though. Those are the weapons you equip give you very specific stat boosts, right?
I guess one thing on that front is that in JRPGs, there's a lot of linear upgrades.
Yes.
Right? Like you get a sword, it's just better than your current sword. Just equip it.
Yeah. You got a wooden sword, now you got an iron sword. And you got a steel sword.
Yep. It's usually very obvious, right? Because one is like attack plus 10 and the next one's attack plus 25. It's like no thinking required, right? And I think that's in a single player game, and I think that's sort of what Pokemon leaned on as well. There's the idea that like you don't need your players to make a lot of decisions. The point of the game is to experience sort of the story and the adventure and getting stronger over time and stuff like that in the battles, not necessarily to try to build the perfect character.
Something to do with treasure.
Yep.
Like having rewards that feel like you're improving, and you can spread that out more if you have stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think one of the things is like you don't need a lot of side grades in a single player RPG. Right?
A bunch of side
You don't
side
need
what?
side grades, like, as opposed to an upgrade. Have you never heard this term?
No, I guess that makes sense. I don't know if I have.
It's
keep going.
I thought it was a common ubiquitous term. It's common in like MMOs.
I mean,
like
it
when
makes
you're
sense.
comparing to or in like League of Legends builds, I think. There's a lot of this. It's like Bloodthirst. There's a side grade over or whatever. Anyway,
interesting.
You don't need a lot of side grades.
Word for that, but
maybe I'm all ears.
You maybe know what the kids say.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly not, based on my interactions with Zoomers. But what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So basically, in a single-player RPG, I think there's just not much use. You don't really need a lot of side grades because the point is not to sort of have people like develop a perfect way they want to play their character or make a build for their character or anything like that. It's really just the point is sort of to get people to go through the story and fight the battles and experience the. I guess I just said all these things like 2 minutes ago.
Well, it's often if there is something more nuanced in the game of like, well, you actually need to use some of these items like the poison resist stuff or ice resist or ice attack or whatever, a lot of the time it's when you get to the harder levels that stuff comes into play. And on the normal or easy level, it's often just, you know, you can basically ignore stuff that isn't just, you know, leveling up and getting better swords.
Right.
Which actually, I like. I think that's a good step up in difficulty, and making it more interesting and deeper.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Because again, you know, single player games, there's sort of a different expectation of difficulty, right? Depending on the context. And
yeah,
I do think single player games correctly lean more towards the simplistic side, which is probably why a lot of these things are hidden.
Yeah, I mean that's another facet of it, right? Like why complicate things for most people?
Yeah, exactly.
Just keep it simple, especially if we're talking about Pokemon, which is clearly meant for kids, primarily.
Pokemon is meant for kids, right? I put this in the notes somewhere, but I think that's an important thing to remember. They are very clearly, and I think correctly, saying this is a game for children, right? Like actual children, like.
But when adults play it, it's still cool.
It is still cool, but you know, whenever there's any decision to be made between, there's an inflection point between what will help a child play it and what will help an adult play it. It's always going to be what will help a child play it.
Yes,
that's sort of the, which is why the games have gotten easier and easier and easier and easier over the years, which is fine. I mean, it is what it is.
Have they? I remember the first one being pretty easy.
Oh yeah, but compared to what's the last Pokemon game you played?
I played, I think, X and Y.
Oh, X and Y. Okay, X and Y was actually like not baby easy, but after X and Y, the games became baby easy.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought I thought that was fairly straightforward too.
Yeah, X and Y is pretty straightforward. Those are my favorite Pokemon games, actually, which is kind of blasphemous. But so the other thing, you know, is that Pokemon, I think, will never, because of this like overriding directive to be for babies, Pokemon will never get a gritty reboot. They kind of
tried to do that with Digimon, right? It was a little bit
Digimon Survive,
maybe, maybe not.
Which is not exactly a gritty reboot, but it's more like a teen, mature type game, right? It's although I don't know too much about it, so I could be wrong. I do. Yeah, I think so.
Why would that would be?
But I think that will never ever happen.
Something else.
They will never make a sort of like harder boiled Pokemon game where you have to like think about the consequence of your action and stuff. I think it's just.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like what is the maybe that'd
I think
be
they
cool,
just don't want. This is a Nintendo thing, right?
There's not a huge
they've decided that this is
unless...
a IP for babies, and they will just not allow this IP to be associated with any kind of like more mature themes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there would be, because
totally. I think that's true. But I think at the same time, they're always going to want to go after the
a large portion
market.
Of the Pokemon player base, purchasing base, are adults that play Pokemon as kids.
Maybe if we get into like a children of men situation where there's no more kids, then we can make some gritty Pokemons.
Right. It's the, well, I mean, I do think fundamentally the nostalgia factor will, in fact, probably maybe already has outpaced the sort of novelty factor for kids, because kids have many more options now for what they want to play.
Yeah, I mean, our parents' generation will be like,
and you know, over time as the years go by,
with games,
more people from my generation and your generation are the ones that are going to still have fond memories of Pokemon, whereas
I don't know how popular it is now, although it certainly seems that way.
Right. But also the kids are growing up with games now are not going to feel about Pokemon the same way.
A friend of ours' kid was glued to the TV watching the new Pokemon when we were over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really talk to a lot of 8-year-olds, but
yeah.
Okay.
I want to go back for a second. I remembered what I was going to say.
So maybe it is still doing well.
There's this tug of war
I couldn't
between.
Really tell you. I'm
the Pokemon that you
sort of
get early on
measure,
are going to get to a high level.
I don't know if actually.
And you have to decide, well, when do I trade out my high level strong thing for a Pokemon that is new and I think maybe is cooler in the long run, or more importantly for like high level play, I guess, like thinking about type even. Like by the end of Pokemon, the first one, because I always used my Bulbasaur or, you know, Venusaur in every single fight, it was so strong it didn't type didn't matter, and I could just win the game with his, you know, like his attacks from the first thing I got. I basically had a Venusaur and a Raichu, and that's pretty much all I needed.
Yep. Yep.
It's weird to me. It seems like it seems like so much of it is set up to get you changing because of types.
Yeah, it do be like
much
that.
ado about types in the cartoon, you know. Anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They try to do some things about. So one of the things is the wild Pokemon levels go up as you go through the game, right? So you can catch. You don't have to train a new Pokemon from the lowest level. You can sort of catch a new one that you just happen to see, and
that's it always struck me as like a core.
The game fundamentally rewards you for just using the same Pokemon for every fight. Like if you can find a way to do that, that is the most efficient thing to do. That's the
and they just have to keep or think they have to keep so many.
Right. I do think Pokemon has a lot of these kind of design decisions that are sort of outdated. I mean, they right.
Yep.
So, for example, it's not an exaggeration to say it's the most efficient thing to do because it's what all the speedruns do, right? All the speedruns route a way to use a single Pokemon because that Pokemon gets all the experience and becomes strong enough to do all the fights, right? So it's objectively the best thing to do, unless there's, you know, there are certain games where you sort of can either manipulate a high level Pokemon early or switch to a legendary. Those are sort of the two alternatives, but in general, but when you switch, you know, you don't switch back. You don't ever use two Pokemon. And that's not a universal thing through RPG speedruns, right? Not all RPG speedruns.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a lot of different
sort of
ways,
put all the eggs in one
RPG,
character. Although, you know, sometimes it's forced because they leave your party or whatever. You have 4 people in your party by force,
but sometimes it's
one way or another.
Like you say, forced.
Pokemon
I like
really.
So I'm the kind of. I mean, this shows our dichotomy, but I'm the kind of person that likes RPGs that force you to put party members in and out, and basically forces you to have time with everyone in your party just to get to know their personality, if nothing less, and to try out their gameplay, and then, you know, maybe give you small choices, but maybe never give me the whole party to choose from. Because it's another decision thing that I'm like, I don't want to decide. I love them all. Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. I think that's fair. I mean, I think we talked about this briefly. Somehow it came up during like Yu-Gi-Oh, but in a lot of games where as a player you can be like, okay, well, I can just do the same thing for the rest of the game, or I can put in like 3 times as much effort, switch all my equipment over, think about a bunch of stuff, maybe grind a little bit to have this character catch up, and then put them in the party.
A lot of Final Fantasy games
have
stick
with the first one because you're just like,
you know,
I'm not really here to sort of try to
certainly not going to put
min-max the game,
Kate Sith
and I don't want to put
in
extra effort to experience more things.
I wasn't going to do it at the beginning
so just take the
when I met him, but
resistance.
Certainly not now that he's still level 3 or whatever. I guess maybe in that game, I think they gain like half experience if they're in your not active party or something, but yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I liked I like the Persona
there's a lot of
and
systems that sort of
Final Fantasy
try
X
to
systems
at least have them
where you
keep
can
up
actually
to
switch out
give you
party
the
members
choice,
during
right? But I think fundamentally, yeah, there's.
I like that mechanic. Force me to or encourage me to use more. So I wanted to do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. One of. Oh, I was just gonna say one of the things. Again, is to make the problem that is pointed out is that you can only use X number at a time, right? In Pokemon, you can only use 1 at a time, but really you can use 6 realistic. But realistically, you don't ever use all 6. In Final Fantasy, you can only use 4 or whatever the number is at a time, right? One of the ways to solve this problem is to allow you to use or encourage you to use like 15 at a time. For example, by the Persona variant of switching party members is going to do that.
And then there's also some
in Fire Emblem.
Some
for example,
games do things where it's like
it's a tactics game,
we're going to
so
split
you
into
have
2
like 12
parties of
characters
4 or
in the map
5 or whatever. Like Final Fantasy VI has a few dungeons that you split into 2, and then I think 3. Yeah, in the final dungeon you use 12 people, which is a lot.
Yep. Yeah, makes there's just there's a lot of ways to sort of encourage you to do more things, and hopefully, and I think all the things we listed are generally ways that don't make it too difficult decision wise for the player.
While I'm thinking about
generally
it,
they're pretty
related to that whole,
they're pretty effective at doing what they want to do, except they're also things that can't necessarily be relied on unless your game is designed around it.
Levels versus variety and type and all that. I have an opinion that this is going to get us canceled, but you're included. I've always kind of thought that Sonic the Hedgehog games are fundamentally flawed. Fundamentally flawed. And I think we are all living in the illusion that they're not. But so it is a game.
Whoa.
It's a game about what? It's about going sideways very fast.
Okay, I'm listening.
But especially in the early ones, the screen scroll didn't happen until mid-screen.
Dead,
so,
right? So
the faster you get, the less you know what's coming. The more likely you're going to run into something, or you're just going to end up pushing a wall, right? Because you don't know when to jump if you're going really fast. And that's like a core issue with the whole series, I think. Whereas I think Mario games are slower sideways and slower up and down, so it's a little easier to see things coming. And his is more, well, Sonic is vertical too. It's just more annoying jumping. No, they come back to it. They usually make 3D, but they did.
No,
what was it called?
agree.
Not Sonic Classic, but
they actually stopped making
one
2D
released
Sonic
a few
games
years
like
ago,
a long time ago.
That it was a sort of remake of all the originals plus a bunch of new levels. I mean, there were new 2D levels.
Really? Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't really. Oh, I guess new levels counts. Okay. But I was gonna say that's not. I feel like in my, I haven't really looked into this, but through osmosis, I feel like they've only made 3D games. The
problem changed when it turned into 3D.
Sort of,
in the early games,
sort of
there was a draw distance problem. Like you just got going so fast.
In fact, it's probably not really a problem with 3D games, right? Because
you wouldn't see it coming, or you'd glitch out. But I don't know. I guess I haven't played a lot of the new 3D ones.
Yeah,
I think the last Sonic I played was in college.
Yeah.
I mean, the for whatever reason, the controls at speed.
Well, they were really bad for
never
many years,
felt
right? But the newest one is
it always
supposed to
felt
be
really twitchy and
somewhere between
like
okay and pretty.
You never felt like you had
Sonic
control
Frontiers,
of things completely, and that I think kind of sunk. It sunk them for me. Like I was always like, It just seemed like I was more on rails than they were pretending. It's amazing how much they keep coming back to it, though. Like they put out new Sonics all the time.
I mean, they sunk them for a lot of people, right? Because I don't think Sonic
it still has name recognition,
really,
I guess.
has done very well until...
I mean, there was a successful movie. I don't know about the second one, but I mean, they made a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, it will get publicity.
Usually it indicates that it made enough money that they're like, oh, we can make more money.
Was it successful?
All right, we can move on.
Is that the indicator for successful? I see. What were we talking about? Oh, anyway, I agree with you. For any game, I think for Sonic, maybe it's a lot of it is hardware limitations. Like they sort of pushed what was available at the time for the classic games to
just
what
the
they
fact
could.
That
I think for the 3D games, it was less hardware limitation and more
until
budget / ability limitations. But
it seems to go. It basically it almost incentivizes you in every level to go slowly and see what's coming up, and then you only really. Yeah, right. Why not play Tails? And then you experience the speed when you go in the little speedy up things and the tubes and the ramps and loops.
I mean, a lot of people just play Tails for every level, right? Yeah. Yeah. I do think one of the benefits for Sonic is sort of the time attack idea, right? Where you're playing a level for the second, like the first
makes
time,
a lot of
maybe
sense for him and.
Or there's this idea that like
you
are sort of incentivized to play, or like one of the main ways to play is to play the level again and sort of see how fast you can go. Right. Yeah, the first time is not
there
a
are
good experience.
Games like that. I'm trying to remember what, but
I mean,
a lot of the time nowadays they just zoom way out so you can see ahead of you. The faster you go, it zooms further out. I can't really think of
many other games that try to have you go fast.
There may even have been a 2D Sonic game that did that, so maybe there's something not fun about that I don't realize. Yes,
that makes sense. Yeah. All right.
Explain Gacha games to our listeners.
I want to briefly talk about a sort of modern. This is where JRPGs live now, I think, for the most part, which is in Gacha games. Yeah. So Gacha games are sort of quasi multiplayer. They're usually mobile games. They usually work off of some derivative IP, but they are games where you earn currency over time or through paying microtransactions, and you use these to pull the lottery or the gacha, in this case, named after the sort of capsule arcade machine that also exists in the US, but more popular in Japan.
Cloud Strife.
So you basically, to get units, usually, so for example, Final Fantasy has several gachas. You can collect, I don't know any Final Fantasy characters. You can collect Cloud Strife, right? Some version of Cloud Strife, but you get it randomly through the gacha system. So you collect some currency, you spend it all, you get some stuff out from the gacha, and these are the units that you have, and you sort of do the content with what you have, right? A core concept of these games is that most players experience scarcity. So they don't have
luck.
For the vast majority of players,
real world
luck
is a core component of these games.
And now you're sort of making do with what you do have.
As opposed to a luck stat that we don't know what it does.
Theoretically, it's like
this. We know what it does. It gets you Cloud Strife.
Yeah, real world luck as opposed to fake luck. But so one of the things that right. Of course. So one of the things with these games is when it comes to hidden parameters, you have to be very, very careful at hidden parameters because you are asking people to make a much more impactful decision compared to in a single player game. And in many ways, an irreversible decision.
Knowing that you have a chance of getting
asking people to make the decision, do I spend my currency now or later when the new unit comes out?
Yeah.
Right. And so...
Then you'll get it eventually.
Well, that's true. That's also how life works, I suppose. But, well, you know, you can just throw more money at it and then you'll have whatever you want. But because there's limited resources, it becomes important, I think, to tell people or have people be able to assess the relative strength of units up front, right? Because you're no longer, you know, in a JRPG, if you make the wrong decision, you can just be like, oh man, I really should not have leveled my Dunsparce, my Caterpie. Actually, Butterfree is like usable. I really shouldn't have leveled this Pokemon. I'm really struggling. I need to go back and catch a new Pokemon and
you've spent money and you've spent time.
You
as
can't
a resource,
do that,
and you're always going to be a little behind as well.
Because
I guess that's a
you
problem with
have
every
irreversible decisions that you make.
Like MMO style grow stats forever game, though.
Right. Yeah, it is basically a fundamentally multiplayer competitive problem in many ways, right? Because when that aspect of it comes in, you need, and part of it is the competitive aspect, right? Because if every unit is, so for example, if every unit performed exactly the same for some reason, like they were all exactly the same unit and they would just look different, then the player can just pick the one they like the look of the best, right? Or whatever. In that situation, the equivalent of obfuscating the stats would be to not tell the player what they look like, right? Like, hey, you can pull out, there's a new unit here. I hope you like how they look, but we're not going to show you.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like...
That feels sort of like a...
generating
stupid decision,
that
right? Like the point is that if the point is that they should pick based on how they look, then you should show them how they look, right? Then they can decide.
My paid trinkets to spin the wheel again. Yeah, it does. These games do have an interesting effect on people with gambling issues, as we've seen on Discord.
Yeah, exactly. And this is. Oh yeah, we can't. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean,
beyond gambling,
but there's, when you talk about gambling, there's I guess there's a whole other layer of what is morally correct to talk about there.
Yeah,
but with like how much you should try to prevent people from like how wrong is it to have people gamble?
I used to be a little more libertarian about it. I'm more
think it's as much of a deal as people make it out to be. But if you have issues, I mean, you have issues.
How it does affect people and how widespread certain things are. It starts to be like, maybe this is, or maybe we should have some sort of, I mean, like a lot of other things, maybe we should have some kind of safety net for people to be.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway. Because, I mean, I still want to play poker and bet money.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, well, we'll save it for the gambling pod. I think I put that in the list at some point. Well, poker is a separate... so I guess the way I think about gambling, like, is gambling evil because it can cause people to lose all their money? It's like, okay, well, gambling can sometimes be sort of an aggressive... There's like a limit because you can sort of be more and more predatory in how you place gambling, right? But I think fundamentally, It's the predatory behavior, I think, is the problem, not the fundamental problem with the act of gambling.
Yeah, I mean,
and the thing I come back to is the idea of the stock market.
The
stock market is literally not random at all, in theory. Assume a perfect stock market here, right? Without insider trading and all that stuff. But even in the perfect world, right, exactly. But it's literally not random, right? Every change has a clearly traceable outcome that most of the time you potentially knew about beforehand, right? Like, hey, you know that this company is launching this new product and you don't know how it's going to perform, but it can go up or down depending on how it performs, right? And so people lose their livelihoods in the stock market in the same way they lose their livelihoods in gambling. So that's sort of where I come back to the idea that, like, there's nothing fundamentally evil about the act of gambling, about randomness.
I was just going to say, with gambling, it touches on the question of whether or not it is innately evil or not by itself. I guess I would say that a core part of gambling is that it plays on some of the psychological issues humans have. Yeah. Or, like going back to our inability to understand probability and things like that. So we're already at a loss. So I feel like there needs to be some level of protection to help those that would totally fall prey.
There's a reason it's called the gambler's fallacy, right?
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think, but yeah, I would say I totally agree with safeguards. What I don't agree with is necessarily this idea that, like, gambling institutions and anything that resembles gambling needs to be immediately canceled. I think it needs to happen at a higher level.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying
because
that either.
Then it would also cover people that are sinking their money into bad investments and into the stock market.
Yeah, and I mean,
and into cars and things like that.
Or throwing their money away on this or that. I mean, it also speaks to the partially, broken society and people looking for escapes.
Yeah.
But so there's other factors involved. But anyway, we should probably get back on topic.
Okay, so gacha games. I do want to touch on IVs in gacha games. So we talked about why it's different in that setting when you obfuscate information, right? You don't. I feel like it's much more dangerous and in many ways quite bad to obfuscate information the way you do in a single player game, right?
With a multiplayer game? Okay.
Yeah, with basically any multiplayer games, especially in a game with scarcity is involved. You want people to, now you're kind of, I guess one way to put it is like, you're sort of asking people to go to the point where they're making decisions, right? I guess in some ways you don't want people to do that. You just want people to, like, throw their money at everything that comes their way and just, like, run with it, just send it, essentially.
Yeah, and I guess with that sort of thing, like, if you did that, you'd just get the community, the first person who got it, hopefully would just sort of distribute that information if it was visible.
Right. And I think the difference is that happens for single player games too, to a lesser extent, right? But the difference in a single player game is that, players don't get annoyed. I certainly do. I get annoyed when I have to, like, go in the wiki and look something up, right?
Yeah.
Like, why doesn't the game just tell me this? But in
me too.
a gacha game or a multiplayer game, that sort of, in some ways, comes with the territory. And in many ways, that's sort of the decision-making aspect is like a core part of gameplay where people are actively seeking that kind of stuff out.
Yeah,
that's
and
no
every
longer,
little
like,
bit makes you more competitive. Like, whereas in a single-player game, there's some allowances for bad decisions or whatever on what armor you wear.
Right. So that's sort of the information. So what about IVs? So if you imagine the system of IVs and you put it in a gacha game, this does not end
intravenous.
Well. Oh yeah, intravenous gambling.
Okay.
They take the gambling and they stick it in your veins.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, it's the Pokemon system where you have unreachable T-max or a theoretical maximum, right? So if you remember our Pokemon example, the getting a perfect 6 IV Pokemon in the wild is like 1 in a billion. Essentially, it's an unreachable T-max.
Has anyone done it? Like, do we know?
Oh, yeah, people.
Perfect?
I mean, it's not actually unreachable, right? Because if you take 180 years divided by the number of people that are playing, I mean, it actually becomes not that unlikely, right?
Right. But now, it's certainly unlikely for me.
Right. For any individual, it's not likely. But across all of the player base, it's actually quite likely.
Okay. Yeah, which makes sense, course, right? Like you want them distributed out there. Yeah.
Now, the thing is, you wouldn't know if it happened in the earlier games because there was no way to check unless you were looking. And there's very few people plugging all their Pokemon into a calculator.
You're just like, my Mr. Mime is the best.
Right, exactly. So what in the later games, it's much easier because there's ways to manipulate it. 5 out of 6 of the IVs can be inherited through breeding by Gen 5, I think, or at least 6. So you can control it quite well. But yeah, so
it's basically like Gacha dog genes when you're breeding them. You got to know there's IV numbers.
Yep, that is how it goes. We had spreadsheets for all of this stuff back in the day. Actually, I still have them. We can look at them at some point. Anyway, IVs and Gacha games, you can imagine, is a bad combination. There's actually only one game that's popular that I know of that has it. I don't know if it still has it. I assume it does. That game is Fire Emblem Heroes.
But so I could unlock a hero that has lower stats than somebody else.
Yeah. So you can get like an ultra rare, like 6% hero, but it's not usable because it has bad IVs.
Oh man. Okay. Shit. So it's just like makes it even less likely you get the thing you want.
I don't know much about Fire Emblem here. Yes, exactly. This is often referred to as whale bait. Whale being a person who spends a lot of money, and it's whale bait because if they want, if it's a person that has an unlimited size wallet, or practically unlimited size wallet, and they want something, if you make it really hard for them to get it, they'll give you a lot of money.
Yeah. We can talk about this maybe in a separate episode, but it's interesting and also sad how much whales are responsible for a lot of propping up a lot of games by themselves. Like, the vast majority of the players don't pay or don't pay as much.
Okay, so I agree that it's sort of sad, but you like the idea of patronage, right? I think we discussed this like 2 episodes ago.
You got me there. Yeah. I mean, if it's just somebody like patronizing your game and spending money because they like it, that is good. Yeah. I guess I worry about the gambling addict, like we talked about.
Right. That's the problem, right? So there's a lot of stories about, so Twitch has this problem, right? Where especially a certain type of streamer and a certain type of viewer, sometimes a viewer donates way more to a streamer than they can afford in order to attempt to garner the streamer's favor.
Yeah, yeah.
So to me, it's sort of the same thing. Again, it comes back to the idea that like excess spending more than you can, is a huge problem in society. I don't think it stems from gambling, and I think this is but I do agree that like they can be a lot of times games that are propped up by whales. It's not because the whales love the game; it's for other reasons, right?
Yeah. So that's the problematic stuff we've been talking about,
right?
Yeah,
right. It's because you like made them addicted, right?
Yeah, they are.
You're like sort of like hooked. Milking them dry, and they're like miserable and unhappy,
no.
but they still spend the money.
I mean, definitely. I mean, on some of the Discord stuff we did for Gacha games we've played, I remember talking to people who had very interesting compulsions to gamble. Although,
people are weird when it comes to spending money, man. Like even like spending in-game gold in Lost Ark, like some of the people we play with just like spend gold in like mysterious ways.
Well, and a lot of people don't maybe even learn like any sort of financial stuff in real life. So maybe it bleeds over to your decisions in games.
I think that's true. Yeah. I mean, what was it like? I think Frog told me one story about someone who like really loved the melee scene, supported the melee scene, Smash Melee, the competitive scene.
Yep.
But the person did it by having like they got like an inheritance of like $1 million, and they just like donated it all over like a year to various members of the community.
Wow.
And then they were unemployed and broke. It's like,
life is back to where we started.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'm sure he'll inherit more.
And all kinds of weird compulsions about money.
Yeah, and I mean, we all are seeking meaning and social fitting inness. Right. So sometimes we're like, every marketing tells you that you can spend your way to those things, and
okay, true.
I mean, you can spend your way to friendship, certainly, but is it real?
Well, is it real though?
Yeah,
that's save that for the. We already had a theology podcast, and now we need a new bit. Save it for the Save it for the dating podcast.
Yeah,
we'll have a full super seducer dating tips and tricks podcast.
Super seducer. My partner in the that Velocity Gnome project. He was on one of those dating shows with
Whoa, really?
With Mr. E, the guy who did like the pickup artist stuff. Yeah, he was on that show, the pickup artist. And he's not at all like that, but he is a huge reality show fan and always wanted to be on a reality show of any type.
I see.
And he basically sent in a tape of him being like a ridiculous, just like beyond stereotype onto like, wow, this is getting grim level like of a nerd. Like he basically portrayed himself as this sad nerd who couldn't get women, which is totally untrue because he's very good. He's very good at that sort of thing. But anyway, he was on it and he felt dirty afterwards.
He was on a what?
I said he was on it and then afterwards he felt dirty about it.
Oh, well. I mean,
yeah, he should.
It's all in good fun, right? Copium?
Yeah.
Where am I? Who are you again?
We were talking about gacha games and IVs.
Okay, T-Max. So in gacha games, it's basically in any competitive games, this idea of T-Max or theoretical max comes in. It's okay, the less competitive, the less multiplayer, the less investment you make, the more it's okay for the T-Max to be unreachable. But I think as you start crossing these thresholds, it becomes a really bad idea to make the T-Max unreachable. Like,
okay, why is that?
It's because it just feels bad, right? You're just like you feel like there's nothing you can do to beat a person who just got luckier than you. I feel like we talked about this at some point. I think we talked about this in Legendaries.
We may, yes, yeah, that sounds right.
Right. Because it's competitive or multiplayer or social in some way, now you have to care about your performance, right? In a single player game, a true single player game, where you're not publishing anything to any other people, you're just like, hey, I'm just having fun. I don't care that it took 3 hours to beat the first boss.
Yeah.
It's fine, right? When there's any kind of social aspect, these things kind of start creeping in one by one, at which point it starts feeling quite bad that you're simply unable, like someone else is simply stronger than you, which I guess if you play sports in real life is a harsh reality that you have to run into early on.
More
but
than sports,
in the video game,
the effect of luck on how your life goes.
Well, yeah, that's also true. But in a video game, hopefully, most of the time, people value like control, right, and freedom to do like what they want, and it feels. I think it's unnecessary. It adds an unnecessary feel bad to just be worse than someone else fundamentally because of luck.
Yep. Well, so is there a way to balance that out if you have so much luck core to the type of game you have? Yeah,
I think so. I guess I think there's a lot of ways. One of the ways is I think you should just not have IVs. Like I think the T-Max should just be reachable as a starting point.
Use heroes you unlock, for example. When I unlock, let's say Polym, I unlock Palom and
From Lord of the Rings.
from Final Fantasy IV. And he's
Lord of the
just
Rings. Okay.
he, or is it she? I don't know.
Okay.
He just has the same stats no matter when you got him, who got him. It's the same, and it's exactly how it was listed on the Gacha announcement, right?
Yeah, that is the way most of them do it. That's the simplest way.
Yeah.
I can, if you want to have IVs. So for example, you could have a paradigm where you always get the unit, right? Or you get the unit at a very high frequency, because the way these games work is usually the quote unquote special unit has a very low appearance rate, like 3%, right? 6%, 1.5%, 0.38%.
I remember seeing that for the first time and being like, holy shit, that is so low. And now I'm kind of used to it.
Yeah, it is. But you could have a different paradigm. So let's say you want, for some reason, you want to be different. So you want to have IVs. You could have a system where the unit appears at a very high percent, let's say 50%, 75%. Or guaranteed every time you do X thing, right? However, they appear with different starting IVs, and maybe it's expensive to raise them to their maximum, but it's still possible, right? So if you get one that's weaker than the others, you can either keep going and get more, right? Look for a better one, or you can say, well, this one is good enough. I will just commit some extra time and save my gacha resources, right?
Yeah.
Instead of gacha resources trying to get a better one, I will put in some extra time on this unit to raise it to the T-max.
Yeah. It's always okay.
So that's possible. I do think maybe we could talk about some new ideas for gacha games at some point.
So you still have the layer of luck on,
but it's not permanent.
Well, I'm saying I thought you were saying with IVs there's like another layer of luck on top of your progression by luck that already exists in the gacha game, right? Like I can still fall behind because I got unlucky and I didn't get this or that hero, right?
Right.
So that's the IV would just be another layer of that, right?
This is where statistical reasoning comes in, right? So in a traditional gacha game, you have, let's say, a 3% chance to get something bad, right? So the reason I increase the chance of getting the unit to 50% is that now you have, 50 divided by 3, more time. You have way more shots to get the unit, and you can use the unlikelihood of getting good IVs to lower that number back down to 3%, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So you roll 100 times, instead of getting 3, now you get 50, but out of the 50, you kind of stack the IVs to make it so that you still go back down to 3% of a quote unquote good outcome.
Yeah, for what actually is a good one.
But it ends up still being the same number. If that's your end goal. Maybe that shouldn't be your end goal, but
I see what you're saying. I see. Yeah, okay. Huh. That's a good point. Okay, but it's just you're saying that layer then just kind of adds a layer of feel badding. Feeling bad.
I mean, I think that one could work. It depends on if that's what you want to do. I think it's just more complicated. Yeah. I think it could be cool, I guess. I don't know. It really depends on the context. But what I do think adds an extra layer of feel bad is the permanent IV. So the important thing in my case is that you can put in time to make up the difference in your bad IVs somehow, right?
Yeah.
But if you can't do that, if you're just stuck with the permanent weakness forever, I think that's quite a large feel bad, and that can only work in very specific situations.
I see. So there's so there's a mechanism for you to spend your other resource time to get little gains to catch up. Okay, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. The different players are at different balances of time versus money,
right,
and skill,
and of course,
or knowing people that are skillful. In my case,
right. Okay, I think that's basically it for gacha games.
We'll talk more in the gacha episode. Yeah. So let's so let's talk about some other games. I want to get into hidden mechanics in some older retro games, and basically something to understand is before the internet. We mentioned this before the internet.
By Childish Gambino.
Before the internet by Childish Gambino. There, it was easier to keep secrets in games, right? Like you could have strategies or codes or things that no one would ever find, and if they did find, what would they do with it? You know, they'd go tell people on the playground or whatever, but send a letter to your uncle or whatever. But you can't post it in a place where every player of Super Mario Brothers is going to see it. And yeah, GameFAQs didn't start until 1995, and so some of these early ones were instead of GameFAQs, there were game companies used these things as quote unquote cheat codes. Like there could be a
Prima official guides.
Yeah, they could Prima official guides. They could basically sell magazines off of what are hidden mechanics. And I guess let's talk about a couple examples. So one really famous is the Konami code, which was just a debug code that was in the original Gradius for the Super Nintendo, 1986. Do you know this? Was this before your time? Do you know the code?
I do know that you asked me this before,
and
I told you the Konami code I knew, and you said it was the co-op one.
Yeah, you had friends. That was good.
I didn't have friends, actually. I barely ever played
that kind of game.
The same game with friends, but somehow I knew the co-op one. I don't know.
It's the same, except you say select before start. That's all. But this became a thing. This code. This was like the famous early cheat code that was whispered on playgrounds. Talked about at school as like, hey, did you hear this? If you play Contra and do this up up down down thing, you get 30 lives, and the game actually becomes playable. Which is what the code was there in the first place for. It was a very difficult game, and for testing, they were like, I need a 30 lives code. And they thought, well, no one's ever going to guess this, which is, I think, true. I think Nintendo put it out as a tips and tricks, like a cheat code, like, hey, we put this in for you guys to cheat, God mode stuff, like we have in other games leading up until the internet sort of made those not as popular.
And also leading up to the invention of the easy mode.
Yes, the invention of easy mode. Well, I mean, there's still things like I want to be invincible, or I want to have all the guns, or things that
true
are on top of that. But yeah, you're right. Another example I pulled up is Mortal Kombat, the original. So it was a big deal that Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis, there was a way to unlock blood. But it was a code. It was a code that did not come included in the documentation or the game. And I guess the idea was maybe Sega agreed to put blood in the game as long as I don't know, you had an adult tell you the code. I don't know why.
Right.
But on Super Nintendo, there was no such code. Like, it was just all the blood was turned into big sweat drops, even though that was sort of the core of the game. And the original fatalities, which were kind of the big difference for Mortal Kombat in terms of fighting games, were at the end of when you win the match, you get a chance to like rip out their spine or whatever. They didn't document those either. They didn't, Midway or whoever developed the first one didn't put out that you could do this. I think they were a little worried that parents would get mad or they'd get bad press about it. So they're like, maybe let's just keep this a secret. But, people can, once they started stumbling upon them doing just weird button combinations, it just became a thing that, people would write down on a piece of paper and bring to the arcade so everyone could do them,
Right.
So, that was a lot of fun.
So, cheat codes. So, one of my first experience with cheat codes is Age of Empires.
Okay.
My friend and I played various Age of Empires demos for quite a long time because that's what we had access to. I actually managed to guess. So they have various cheat codes for getting like free resources, getting invincible units, building stuff faster, things like that. That were, again, mostly used for testing, I would assume.
Yeah.
I actually managed to guess like 2 of them because we looked online, or what we had access to when we had access to the internet, which was not all the time, but we couldn't find all of them, right? Because it was a long time ago. But we looked online, we found some of them, and based on the patterns, I guessed the cheat code for food, which is pepperoni pizza, and then the cheat code for stone, which was quarry.
Interesting. What were the other codes like?
I don't remember. I only remember the ones I remember.
That's cool, though.
That I guessed correctly.
That feels like a huge discovery when you're a kid.
It's like God gamer.
Yeah, like I am.
My first true God gamer moment.
Yeah.
I think the wood one was like lumberjack or something, so I kind of just like figured it was a generic stone related word.
Yeah,
I can only think of like 3 of them.
Which makes sense. Yeah, I mean, cheat codes are interesting because it's like you say, a lot of the time they were put there for debug purposes, for testing, and just left in either because they were rushed or they didn't want to remove them because doing anything to code means it could break.
Yep, it sure does.
And they were like, well, no one will find this anyway, and eventually it turned into, like I said, a way to sell tips and tricks to people who didn't know.
In old games, there's also a lot of debug rooms and stuff left in, right? Like Link to the Past has one, etc.
Oh, that's right. Link to the Past has it does have a debug room, doesn't it? It has a debug room, and it also has a. Did you know it has a contest winner room? There was like a Super Nintendo lottery contest winner, and the winner gets a room and a plaque in Link to the Past. And it's in there, but it is like basically impossible to find. You'd have to be told exactly how to find it, but it's there. I'll send it to you after this.
Interesting.
Another example I remember coming across when I was a kid, this was my time, in 1994, Super Metroid had a few techniques that you can do that weren't explicitly spelled out how to do either in the game or the manual. Some of them were literally characters in the game kind of showing you how to do it without telling you the buttons required or exactly how to do it. And so it was sort of a halfway hidden thing. But like wall jumping, for example, you could do it from the very beginning of the game, but you don't learn that you can do it until later in the game. Then there was also something called Crystal Flash, which is where Samus basically like floats in this glowing ball, and you restore all your health and you restore all your missiles and things like that. It's basically when you're very low on all those things, you have the ability to do this as like a desperation thing. But nobody had any idea that this was even possible until I don't think I saw it until. Maybe I saw it in Nintendo Power, but I think I didn't see it until college on like speedruns or something. It was just a big secret. I don't know how they expected people to know it.
Yeah, it's a good. I guess it kind of brings up 2 points, right? One is, I guess back in the day, it really was a marketing thing. It was like by hiding stuff, you could sort of sell it later.
Yeah, you could sort of meet it out in a way that gets you a little extra news hits, I guess.
Yeah, and that's sort of all died with the internet, right? But I guess that was sort of a real thing back in the day. Like to me, it's almost like sort of the way fiction used to be published in like magazines, or like serials, where it's like it's really stuff that's all done and already exists, but you just can't get access to it here. So, we'll just put little snippets here in this medium, and that you can buy because you don't have the internet, right? So you can't really get.
Yeah, we just get more value out of the shit we already have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure developers leave in things here and there, which I guess sort of, you know, we're getting into the territory of Easter eggs, but yeah, it is interesting to think about. I mean, so if that's the case, though, I guess things get, well, we can talk about some other modern examples, but let me get a few more older ones. Yep. Some mechanics in fighting games and shooters weren't, you know, were totally obfuscated. Like Street Fighter, I think we talked about damage scaling, like the closer you get to death, the less damage your opponent's hits do.
Oh, and is it closer to death? Because in modern games, it's the number of combos.
Oh, really? Interesting. No.
Yeah, modern games, it's...
We both did it.
It's a game of chicken.
Yeah.
In modern games, it's based on the number of hits the combo has done. So if you've done, like, the longer your combo goes on, the more damage scaling exists.
Yes. Okay. That happens too, right? Like the longer the combo, everything gets, your returns are more marginal, less marginal. Your returns, your damage goes up less and less and less the longer the combo is. And yeah.
By the way, it wasn't always this way. Which is why whenever we watch old games in Will It Kill, the combo is always just like fucking explode the enemy because there's no scaling at all, right? So you just do full damage with every hit and they just die.
Yeah, they haven't thought about that. Not yet. There's also a thing I've seen referred to as last hit point in a lot of shooters and action games where if the enemy hits you with something that deals damage that would kill you normally, it just takes you to 1 hit point. So you have that like one last stand, basically. Which makes it feel a little bit more action movie-like, I think, and less like you're less likely to get totally sniped out of nowhere.
Right.
Wave dashing in Super Smash Brothers. This is a bug example, but this was a bug that became a huge mechanic in the original game, I think, and maybe the second one too. I don't. Maybe you know this.
I don't know much about 64, but yes, wave dashing is a huge thing in Melee.
Yeah.
I'm actually not sure that it's a bug. It might be a bug. I mean, it depends.
I thought it was something to do with like a weird interaction when you dodge when you're hitting a surface, but I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. The thing is, I don't know much about Melee. I just watch it and I like sort of learn through osmosis of like what the commentators say. But a lot of things over the time as they learn more of the game, a lot more things feel intentional because there's like specific ways things interact that feel intentional. I don't know if Nintendo's ever spoken about it.
What's an example of that? What do you mean?
I don't know if I can necessarily even think of an example, but it's just the way, now that I say it, I'm trying to remember exactly what context I heard this in.
Okay.
So maybe we'll come back to that. This is a good patch notes topic. If I find it again, I'll come back to it. But basically, I'm not certain that it's a bug because, or it's definitely okay. I would say it's definitely not a bug. It may have been not used in the quote unquote intended way, but the way I think the way it works, none of the individual pieces don't work the way it's intended, I think. Again, I don't really know, so I guess I should stop talking. But that's my understanding.
Yeah, we'll do a hot fix.
Yeah.
Real fix.
Yep.
I mean, we talked about how another example from Street Fighter 2 combos, right, were not like an intentional thing, but they turned into it.
Right. Again, that's also, I guess this is engineer brain coming up, but that's also like not a bug, right? It's not like something didn't work the way it was supposed to. It's more that they didn't really think that you could hit them while they were still in hit stun. Again.
Okay.
I guess. Anyway.
I mean,
Moving on.
I guess I'd consider it like an unintended consequence, though, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. I think I'm just being semantic about what's called a bug because
Okay.
a lot of times execs call things bugs that are not bugs and blame it on
Okay.
us.
I
And
see.
we get defensive about that.
I'm gonna call
So it's
them.
probably
I'm
just
gonna
that.
call them all glitches now.
Oh, I love.
Glitches get stitches. So there's also Kojima does some interesting shit with this, where there's like a lot of hidden things happening that you may not know about, or in the example of the Psycho Mantis, the famous Psycho Mantis fight, where you are supposed to take your controller out of port 1 and put it into port 2 in order to stymie the telekinetic powers or the telepathy of your enemy. Like he can't read your moves if you change the controller port. Do you know this?
I
Know
see.
this story?
I sure don't, but I do
Yeah.
now.
It was sort of an interesting thing, but the idea that anyone would think to do that is, I wonder if a single person exists that did that without. If you die like 5 times, eventually your kernel calls you and it's like, "Hey, wait, I get it. He's reading your controller movements. Put the controller into the other slot." And I'm like, "Okay." It's a cool like gimmick, but I mean, it's not exactly an ongoing hidden mechanic like some of these.
Well, if they told you, if they tell you in the game, then
It's not. Yeah, exactly. They tell you, but it's
right.
It's sort of just stood out as to me as one of the weird kind of I guess it's more just unusual things that Kojima has put in,
for sure.
Unexpected ways that the hardware and the software work. He does stuff like that. Pretty recently, the Alien, well, I guess sort of the horror game Alien Isolation taps into your microphone and apparently doesn't tell you. So if you are making noise in real life, the alien can hear you in the game, which seems kind of mean to not tell you about, but that's what they did.
I'm not even sure that's legal these days.
Yeah, don't you have to give permission? Maybe they tricked you into doing it for some other reason.
I don't know if that's legal either.
Yeah, perfect. Tricked. Legal.
Yeah. I mean, that seems cool. That seems cool, but I don't know if it's worth the effort, to be honest. I don't know if it's like a...
I mean, to me, it runs into some of the problems you were saying. It kind of feels bad. Like, it's cool, but the only way you're going to find out about it is either totally ahead of time, in which case it's kind of moot, or afterwards when you read about it after you've been dying a lot and be like, oh, what the fuck? I didn't even know this was happening.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it's like it's like sort of trying to blend those two last examples are like sort of trying to blend the line between the game and like actual reality.
Yes. Yeah. It's trying to get outside your TV a little bit. And they're both hardware interesting things.
Right.
The things that are
which
physical.
Is like, I don't mind that they tried them. I don't know that they necessarily work that well, but it is worth thinking about, I think.
We should just stick to the rumbling, right?
Oh yeah, rumble.
I'm in the game.
We can have reverse rumble, where the more you move your controller, the more your screen shakes. How about that?
I wonder if they've done that.
I
mean, that sounds like a Wii game.
It does sound like a Wii game.
Yeah, because of
which I don't know if that's a good thing, but
hey, there's things to like about the Wii.
It runs Smash Melee. I think that's probably that's a top tier use for the Wii.
Got Nintendo back in the game, man. They were floundering.
Yeah. Oh, were they really?
Yeah, GameCube times. Yeah, this was when Xbox and PlayStation were ruling.
Whereas GameCube, I thought GameCube was like consensus one of the goated consoles of all time.
Absolutely not. Where did you hear that?
I don't know.
Among your friends?
That seems to be the way it. I mean, not from. I never knew about sales, but from the quality of the game and the number of like.
Interesting. No, it was I'm
games.
almost certain it was a failure for them. They really tried to reinvent themselves because they were getting their asses kicked by Sony and Microsoft
Oh, interesting.
in those years. Yeah.
Because like I feel like there's so many like GameCube games that did very well, at least historically. Maybe they didn't do well at the time, like Sunshine and Melee and
Sunshine was probably
Pokemon
like
Coliseum.
Sunshine was like maybe the least successful Mario game, mainline Mario.
Really?
Game. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
I think so.
Wow, that's
maybe I'll look it up afterwards and hotfix
right.
if I'm not, but
I
think this is right.
Fix it. Yeah. I mean, I thought like Sunshine is my favorite Mario game from a viewer perspective. So
explain that.
The movement is the coolest.
You mean with the water pack and everything?
Yeah.
Wow. Most people hate that thing. I think it's interesting. I like that game. I like it.
Well, I
fine.
I only care about Mario in the context of speedruns. I don't play Mario games.
Oh well, Mario Sunshine speedruns, those are fun. Those are great.
Yeah.
And he's got you can squirt some water on the ground and then you can slide, all that stuff. Yeah, that's great. It was just that game was generally regarded as a little harder, too hard, and some of the challenges were just like not as fun as maybe some other games. But
then they made the Wii. Well, this explains a lot about Nintendo. Actually.
Yeah, and they made the Wii.
And then they made Brawl. And, okay.
And Super Mario Galaxy was on the Wii. That was a great Mario game.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's sort of when they started making all their games way easier, right? That's because Pokemon became way easier around that time too. Because I think that GameCube was the GameCube games were like relatively difficult too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean they've always had more of a bent towards kids games than the other consoles, but and generally easier stuff. But I mean, original Nintendo was hard. Super Nintendo had its hard moments, and it sounds like GameCube had some too. I didn't play those hard games on GameCube, but
well,
yeah, Wii was definitely
Sunshine apparently falls in this category, right?
Yeah,
which I can see. So I mean, Melee certainly does compared to the later offerings as well.
Yeah, more complicated, a little harder to do. Yeah, and then they after the Wii, they briefly released the Wii U, which was a failure, and that's why they rushed to get to the Switch pretty fast.
What was the purpose of the Wii U? I still don't really understand what
the Wii U was. Them trying to do a
a handheld.
I mean, it's kind of what the Switch did. It's
just the worst.
It's having a handheld tablet thing, and also it plugs into TV. So,
I guess that makes sense.
But they also did, which they can't do on the Switch because the Wii U actually functioned like a second screen in some games. So like you could play Zelda Wind Waker on the TV while the all your items and your maps and things are displayed on the Wii U little handheld.
Right.
Which was fun, but it was also like hard to make and I think it was possibly expensive to make too. But anyway, for whatever reason that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I've ever seen a single person use the Wii U as a handheld. So that
I tried it. I mean, I had that shit. I played. Did you ever? This reminds me. Did you ever play any GameCube games that used the Game Boy Advance as a second screen?
No, I just played Game Boy Advance games on GameCube a couple of times, but no, not.
So you can plug it in and then it like displays on the screen. Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there was a Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, I think.
Okay.
Where you had like a magic detector or something, and your dungeon map on the handheld, and then the actual game on the screen. Oh yeah, and I believe you could play like multiple players, so you can have your like stats screen and changing equipment screen on your own Game Boy, so you don't have to pause the game for the other people.
Okay.
Anyway,
I mean, a lot of that stuff became the DS, right? Essentially.
Yeah. Exactly. Anyway, this is a little about the evolution of Nintendo hardware.
I'm very surprised that the GameCube did badly. I'm not surprised that the Wii U did badly, but the GameCube was.
Let me check. Nintendo hardware.
We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. We got.
Okay. All right. Well, we are at 2 hours now. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to just turn this into 2-part and finish later?
Yeah, let's just finish this section about let's end with talking about how it is important to keep things simple, and then we'll save the rest for another time.
Okay.
I do want to talk about, we already talked about this mostly, but in an actual competitive game, what changes? Again, when you add the layer of competitiveness, I guess we already talked on most of this stuff, but it becomes like all the value you get from obfuscating information, I think you lose, right? Because when you're competitive, like for people that play competitive games, for most people, I think part of the experience is like learning the systems and like learning how to get an advantage and things like that. Right. It's not really very quickly, I think, if you're into the competitive aspect of it, you stop having fun just running your head into a brick wall. It's more like you run your head into a brick wall a couple of times and you're like, okay, something is not right here. I need more information to figure out how I can beat this, right? Because again, in a single player game, you can't really lose, right?
Not really.
You can't really lose. In a competitive game, if you don't know what you're doing, you just lose over and over and over again.
Yeah,
you can't just level up and.
Well, I mean, the Gacha game we were playing, I mean, that's exactly what I did. I played a little bit and I was like, oh, clearly I don't really know what I'm doing, so I need to look up some stuff. And indeed, I was not playing it all correctly.
Right, which is I think a cost or a benefit, depending on your perspective, of just having a competitive game, right? But I think if you have a competitive game, this comes in. So, for example, in a game like League of Legends, it may not be in the game, but all this information is out there at a very clear level about, like, you know, what item build gives you the most damage, or like stuff like that, right? Like how much crit is optimal or whatever. Whether or not that's in the game, it may not be worth putting it in the game, but it is something that I think is readily available to everybody, and is an important thing to have out there in some capacity in the game or not. A lot of games actually, I know, have the wiki integrated into the game. I know Guild Wars 2 has this.
Yeah.
Dota has like a variant of it.
Yeah, that became a thing in, I guess, not that recent years, but, sort of acknowledging that there exists this whole ecosystem on the internet or fan made or whatever, separate from the game in whatever way. And why don't we just cut out the middleman and just put it in the damn game?
Yeah, exactly. Because engineering wise, it is expensive to put this information into the game, right? Because it's expensive the first time because you have to make a whole page and hook up all the information that's displayed. But it's very expensive to maintain because every balance patch you have to update the information manually, right? At which point you're just like,
if you integrate other just trusted feeds, other people are doing the work and updating stuff.
Exactly.
And
why?
It's like Riot Games also couldn't put out here's the best attack build for Caitlyn or whatever. True. They can't do that. They can point to here's the most popular one on whatever the fuck those websites were called.
Dota, actually, that's a good point. Dota has a very similar system where players can make a build guide that like shows up in your shop in game, right? Like you can select a guide.
I mean, that was the worst part of League of Legends for me, is all the buying shit.
Yeah.
I mean, and having to have a second monitor because I just never learned it well enough to make decisions smartly. It's just like, I'll just follow whatever they say.
For as much shit I give about to League of Legends about being like very simplistic, I do need to constantly remind myself that it's still very complicated if you ever played a MOBA before.
It's hugely complicated. I remember having this feeling when I started playing it, because I was like pretty confident that, I've played a lot of different games over my whole lifetime. I started playing it and I was like, there's so many like detailed things in here that are such so difficult, so surprisingly difficult, that I was like, wow, there's really a lot going on here that really gives you space for skill to show,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
New player experience in a very complicated game, I think maybe is a good. I guess that's basically a follow up or a deep dive into a part of the tutorials thing, but like new player experience for a really complicated game.
I wonder what that is for League of Legends now, but I know they consistently ignored the tutorial because they were like, the tutorial's not good, but we also are not sure how to make it that much better, so we're just going to let people keep teaching their friends how to play, because that's...
Dota is the same thing. In fact, Dota still hasn't fixed it the way League has, because League has like a full, like, robust system now, right?
Yeah, they did do it eventually, and that made it nice, yeah.
I don't know if Dota has one still.
They're very stubborn.
But yeah, I think it is worth like us kind of talking about this a little bit at some point. Just what are the tenets of how to make such a tutorial good? Maybe it's a little case by case, but we'll see.
Oh, and speaking of hidden mechanics, there's the matchmaking algorithm. That's a hidden mechanic.
Matchmaking art, yeah. That's a good point, actually. There are some things that still need to be obfuscated, right? Because
I mean, that's like a trade secret.
Yeah. You do have to do that because that's where abuse comes in, right? If you can figure out exactly how the matchmaking works. People have done this in Dota, actually. People have selected, because in Dota you can matchmake on like servers and by language and stuff.
Okay, so you can narrow it down.
Yeah. So people like matchmake on like South Africa servers with only like Russian as the language or whatever. And they like win trade on the rankings there or whatever.
Interesting.
So there's, there are still things that have to be obfuscated even in a competitive game. Those I would generally classify as like outside the game, trade secret type stuff that can be abused if.
Yeah, and they tend to obfuscate your slurs if they're in text.
I mean, that's also true.
Yeah.
They don't do that very well. I saw some.
Yeah, they don't do it especially well. League. There's a lot of ways around it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
I think they can do better, but it is what it is.
I wonder if is voice chat, is like general voice chat any better than it ever has been? Have they ever figured out how to make that a good thing?
Dota has had voice chat as the main form of communication, like in-game voice chat, basically since launch, and I think it's fine. Like it's not anything special, to be honest. Like you just mute people the same way you mute people's text, and it's fine. Like
just mute the problem people.
I don't think people have any specific voice chat complaints compared to text.
Yeah. Learn to play new.
So, yeah. What was I? Oh, so in security, computer security, there's this concept called security by obscurity. Do you watch the Lockpicking Lawyer? Are you aware of this individual?
I think you told me about him, but no, I haven't. I'm gonna type it in now so I don't.
This is it's just a popular YouTube channel that simply does lockpicking videos.
Yeah, I mean, I've told you I know some lockpicking, right?
I think so. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. I learned how to lockpick in high school.
Oh, nice. That's a classic hobby, of course.
Inspired by Quest for Glory 1.
Oh, I see. Oh, speaking of which, I forgot to mention, in Quest for Glory, there is you taught me a secret, which is show sign, right?
Oh, yeah, make sign. Yeah, show sign.
Or make sign.
It may have been in the documentation, though. I'm not sure.
I guess that counts.
Yeah.
What was I talking about? Oh, anyway, So, the question comes up with the idea of, is it ethical to make lockpicking videos? Like you're showing people how to pick these locks. Isn't that unsafe? In security, this is a very old problem that's mostly been that there's mostly consensus, which is security by obscurity, which means this thing is safe because you don't know how to break it. You can break it easily, but you don't know how.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Which is what those words mean, right? It's secure because the way to break it is obscure.
Yep.
This is not security, right? This is not a functional form of security because what will happen is that bad actors will figure out how to break it, and you won't know that it's unsafe, right?
You know, this is interesting. This reminds me of with lockpicking. All these videos usually, I mean, the effect they have is to show that how easy these things are to break. Often, like the locks that you see every day can be picked within a matter of seconds in many cases. And so, you know, what's really secure and what's not. But that said, it's not like you see people picking locks all the time in real life for some reason.
Right. So it's sort of like if you leave your door unlocked, that doesn't mean you're going to get robbed, right? The thing that's preventing you from getting robbed is not the lock on your door. It's the people that you live by, people that don't want to rob you. And two, there's like social, you know, we have a police.
If I do this, I could go to jail, you know?
Right. Exactly. Right.
It's the lock isn't the big thing. Although I think some of us maybe think of locks and security systems as more of that. I guess security system is a little more that way, but yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to security, you know, things can be objectively more or less secure. Nothing probably is perfectly secure, especially if there's a human element involved. But you know, security by obscurity has long been considered to not be security at all, right? You don't go into anything with exchange that just because you don't tell the player something, you know, which is where I'm going with this, that they, you know, if we just don't tell them, they won't abuse it. That can work in the short term, right? Like if you find a bug, like a game-breaking bug, that was usually wanting to keep it secret, but that's because they're fixing it, right? Not because, oh, we'll just leave it there. No one, you know.
No one found it. Yeah, if it's
no one,
there, we'll
one person
like,
found it. Don't tell anybody and it'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that also goes for things like the matchmaking system and stuff. There are some things you want to keep obscure, but hopefully that's not the main deterrent. The main deterrent is that it like works, or like you there's some minor issues that you can iron out as they come up, but you know, like generally works. Not that it's actually quite broken and nobody should not show anybody it.
Nobody has to know.
Yeah. Okay, let's quickly talk about speedrunning, because speedrunning, I say this for the end because this is what happens when you take the single player game, the casual game where you're playing to have fun and you can't lose, and you turn it into a competitive game.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's a competitive game. Yeah.
Right. So how do people's interactions with like stats and stuff and combat math change once you start speedrunning?
Yeah, I mean, once you start speedrunning, I mean, the goal, of course, is to shave off every second, every frame that you can. So naturally, people are going to dive into the code and try to get to all of these hidden mechanics, right? So like the example with Quest for Glory, which I speedrun, it has RPG stats in it, and all those have behind-the-scenes calculations to figure out how they grow and how they affect combat or how they affect the puzzles. All these things aren't told to you. Like, you don't know that it takes 35 climbing to get over the town wall, but that's what it is.
Right.
And we go in and want to figure out all the things that can give us an advantage, of course, that aren't shown. I mean, so we might find out, for example, that the fine sword that you get is actually no better than the fine dagger that you had in the beginning of the game. Stuff that it's just even the game hinted at could turn out to be wrong, right? Like, there are bugs in games where it's like, oh, if I equip this sword, I actually get weaker rather than stronger. I mean, there's shit like that. So finding that out is one thing. And then there's something that comes to mind with adventure games is finding out all the synonyms for stuff, like all the different ways of saying things quickly, because you got to type it in. It's just not necessary. I mean, there's trial and error, of course, but some of these things we never would have figured out without actually looking at how the thing was made.
Yeah. And a lot of reverse engineering happens, which is kind of how Pokemon IVs got figured out, right? People just look at the numbers and do some very smarter people than me look at them and do some math and
do some trials, get some
we did try to figure out how speed worked in the Gacha game we played, and
Mm-hmm.
we gave up. We
Oh,
got pretty close, I think, but
I
somehow
mean, you guys did some crazy stuff on there. I mean, to me, it was very impressive how much went into that.
yeah.
Your mega tracker, your mega calculation stuff, like to figure out what
Yeah.
the expected power values of all the different stuff is.
Yep. That's the life of when you start life as a gamer and then you get older and you become an engineer.
Yeah,
And
you
then
open a spreadsheet.
this is what happens, I guess. But yeah, so I think I think the example of speedruns basically points out that like a lot of the search for information, a lot of the value of hiding information, again, I think this is the third example now, it goes away when you become competitive, right? Like when there basically comes any factor other than just wanting to like passively enjoy the game, essentially, right? Just like turn off brain, go forward, let the game tell you what to do. Hope that it's a good experience, crafted so that you can beat it, right? With that sort of mentality, you quickly get to the point where you're seeking this information instead of trying to hide from it. Those are all. So we just gave a bunch of examples of why it can sometimes be annoying that the information is hard to find, right? Because, so for example, when you're reverse engineering something, you kind of just wish that someone would just tell you, right? Like, can't you just?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. There's an element of discovery still with finding bugs.
Right.
Like there is no developers telling you all the different bugs that you can do, and they probably haven't explored what you can do with them anyway. So
right.
Although
I
may
do
be
know
mining.
there's some stories of developers popping into speedrunning communities and giving like secrets or tips and tricks.
Yeah, that's fun. That's always a fun time.
Okay, but so why hide any of this information at all? I think there is a good reason. So what is the value of keeping things simple? I think we should go back to the very, very first point, which is when you have decision overload, people bounce, right? And you might say, well, look at all these competitive games. They make you make a bunch of decisions from the very beginning. Well, a lot of people bounce after their second game of League of Legends, right? And they're just like, this is way too much. I can't handle this information, right?
Yeah.
I have to pick one of these like 12 champions, and then I have to like figure out a whole build, and then I have to like learn how to last it. Like, that's way too much. I can't do that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they don't really consider a person playing the game until they've done it many, many times.
Yeah. Like, imagine the amount of time it takes you to beat, I don't know, like God of War. And in the time that a average casual player finishes God of War, like you're barely getting started in League of Legends.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're not even at the stage where you're like, you even know what all the champions do yet, right?
Oh, for sure.
And you've already finished a AAA game.
Especially not now.
Which really points to like, yes, there are some players, both games can exist, but you have to sort of know your audience, right? Which is why a lot of these things are hidden. Like in a single player game that you're expecting someone to only play for 40 hours, 25, 35, 45 hours, whatever, there is value in keeping these things hidden just because the experience that the player seeks is different than someone who's looking to play League of Legends maybe for 1,000 hours, right?
Yeah, totally. And related to the Alien Isolation example, I guess I know a lot of horror and suspense games use hidden mechanics that are, just meant to make things scarier. I know one example. There's a game. Is it Clock Tower? I can't remember. There's some game where you're told you have some disease that will eventually kill you or maybe kill your sister or something like that. And every time you die in the game, that disease gets worse.
You die in real life?
You die in real life. No. Every time you die, you get closer to like a final ending where you can't retry sort of thing. But in reality, you can never actually get to that point. It just tells you can. So it's like a misleading hidden mechanic.
That's kind of funny, actually.
It's just to scare you. And the you or she looks worse and worse and worse and worse, but still, if you beat the game, they get cured or whatever. So
That's very interesting. That's I did not think that's where that example was going, but that is it's like have you ever played Reciteer?
Reciteer?
Reciteer. It's like this RPG. It's like this like Japanese RPG shop owning game kind of thing. Anyway, in this game,
what?
It's called Reciteer and Item Shop's Tale. I think it's actually like kind of.
I see. An Item Shop's Tale. Yes.
Anyway, the reason I bring it up is you have to make like monthly payments because you're like in debt or whatever. That's why it's like a shop owning game. And when you fail your payments, because like in like the third week in your first playthrough, you realize that it's actually impossible. So when you fail, you wake up in week 1 and it was all a dream, but you keep all your stuff. It's the first.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's sort of like the opposite of that in some ways.
Yeah, it's nice.
What were we talking about? Oh, okay. Yeah. So one of the reasons it's good to hide this information sometimes is you're not trying to get the players to make the most optimal decision in a single player game. I mean, you're not really trying to do that in a multiplayer game either. That's sort of the community guiding things along, right, and the competitive nature. But you just want the players to give the information to give the players that so that they can make a fun decision for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Or,
they don't necessarily
like get them more
into the optimal decision as much as the fun. They can make fun decisions throughout.
Right. And I think that key point is where, it makes a lot of things a lot easier for the game balancer, right? Like single player games don't necessarily need a balance team the way League of Legends does, just because it doesn't.
You only have to do it once if it doesn't change, right?
Right. Yeah, that's also true. But you don't really need things necessarily to be super balanced as long as the range of potential outcomes or the range of
it's more balanced for fun and difficulty than it is balanced for balanced opponents.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just trying to guide people to make the decisions that have the most fun, and you're what that also means is you're taking other decisions out of their hands, like where to put points when you level up and things like that, right? That's just one example. Obviously, for example, in WoW, you also don't have that. But anyway, the point is decisions that sort of are unnecessary to have fun or to like sort of or like are not intuitive or require a lot of information, you can just take out of the player's hands as long as you sort of make the rest of the experience allow them to beat the rest of the game, essentially.
Yeah, just let me choose to be just let me choose a feminine or a masculine character. Or a non-binary gender character. That's my big decision.
The slime individual.
And do they have a ponytail or not?
And for me, this gets a little personal, is that ignorance is bliss, right? And it's important to remember this. So I can't play, well, there's a lot of reasons I can't play Pokemon the same way, but I can't really play the same way now that I know IVs exist.
Right.
Right, and how nature, like I can't really, and I don't think I'm unique in this, I think most people can't just turn off the part of their brain that's like, hey, I now understand what this word means, and this word means this thing kind of sucks.
You can't unlearn it.
So, there is some value in hiding information just because if you want people to have a more passive experience, in other words, you don't want them to learn that kind of stuff. And maybe they don't want to learn it either, right? And they can avoid it on the internet, but they can't necessarily avoid it from you or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to feel better about every Pokemon you catch if you don't know that yours sucks.
Yep, exactly.
Just be like, yeah, hey, I got a Bulbasaur. And now move on. I can go catch one of the other 700.
Yep. Did you ever catch them all in any Pokemon game?
Did I ever catch them all? Don't think I did. No. Did you?
No, definitely not.
Didn't you?
That particular
you had to trade for some of them. A lot of some of the originals were like event Pokemon, weren't they? Or one of them at least.
Yeah. In Gen 1, you couldn't get a Mew. you actually couldn't get a Mew in the U.S. Outside of cheating in any way. I think maybe one event in New York City or something.
Yeah, but some sort of in-person Japanese event you could get it. Yeah. Wow. I mean, they do that in all of them. Well, actually, I don't know. They do that in Pokemon Go.
They do. There's now that they have the internet, so there's still in-person event Pokemon, but there's more events on the internet. And now it's much easier to get like every Pokemon. There's like special event Pokemon that are different.
Well, I mean, Pokemon Go is still, you had to be in person to trade. Like you had to be.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And there were continent exclusive Pokemon. Like,
okay.
Kangaskhan was in Australia.
Okay, that's cool.
What's that duck with a leak?
Farfetch'd.
Yes, Farfetch'd. Farfetch'd, I think, was in Europe for some reason. Anyway.
Okay.
And I think we had like the bison one, the buffalo one with 3 tails.
Tauros, yeah.
Yeah, Tauros. Anyway.
Pokemon expert.
Yeah. I mean, I did play a lot of Pokemon Go. My wife and I played for years.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know much about Pokemon Go. I would be
it.
curious about learning more about it, but I feel like they never had a good idea of what to actually do with the game, like what you're actually supposed to do in the game.
Yeah, it's not like really much of a game. It's more like a fun thing for a pedometer to have. It's like I'm going to go an extra mile so I can spin this Pokestop and get more Pokeballs, and I get more exercise.
And I think but like somehow I don't remember the details, but they added a bunch of like stat stuff and like actual Pokemon battling stuff.
Yep, there's a lot of battling, and that's around the time we fell off, just because the game itself just wasn't that interesting.
Like somehow I feel like they really took a wrong step there, and they really should have leaned into the idea that this is a game for people that like walk around and go outside, and not a game for people that want to like do math and fight Pokemon
I think
battles.
That's where they went wrong. I mean, leaning into that aspect that clearly made it a success. I think they really wanted to get battling in because it was a core part of what Pokemon is supposed to be, but it really didn't work all that well on phone.
We can brainstorm some Pokemon Go ways to keep the core idea of Pokemon Go intact.
Sure. I mean, I like it. My wife bounced off specifically because she felt there was a pressure to I forget, you give up your duplicate Pokemon to get candy, and then you give candy to evolve, to evolve. And basically you could maximize your experience points by doing a certain sequence of evolves when you're using a lucky egg, which gives you 30 minutes of double experience.
See, this is right.
So
we talked about this.
So she was like, "Oh well, now my Pokedex is, or not my Pokedex, my bag is full of them, and I have to go through and like sort them and evolve them." And she was just like, "It's too much math. I gotta like write it down on a piece of paper and spend half an hour doing this. It's not fun."
Yeah.
And the truth is, she didn't need to, but it feels like you do in the game.
Mm-hmm. This is the ignorance is bliss.
Yep.
Another version of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. If she didn't know that existed, it wouldn't be a problem.
Yep. Yeah. Or something like waste feels bad, right? Like, yeah, you don't have to do this. You can just throw these away, but that's not. Yeah, not something that people want to do.
It's true. It gives value to the extra ones you catch past the first one, and that's good. But
but like you said, I would say that type of system sounds exactly opposite of what the game should focus on, right?
Yeah.
For given that what audience you're targeting and what audience plays your game, which is people that want to go outside and walk around.
Yeah, and it could be simple as like you just turn on auto get rid of duplicates, and it gives you the candy anyway. And if someday you want to go and spend it, you can, but just don't make me.
Alrighty. Hey, do you want to talk about our guest?
Oh, the upcoming guest? Yeah, I
Yeah,
suppose we may record that before we record the part 2 of this.
most likely. Yeah.
Yeah, a buddy of mine who I met at Riot Games, named Vagar, is going to be on the show. He works. He has done a number of production roles, like producer roles in games in various companies, and I think he's part of a startup right now. I don't know how much he can say about it, but yeah, he's going to be on the show and talking about generative AI in games, which it sounds like Regal knows things about. I'm going to have to do some
I
research.
I know a little bit. We'll talk more about exactly how deep we want to get into it. I know enough to understand how it works, and I've played around with it a lot. I actually use ChatGPT quite a lot right now,
Oh.
because I think it's funny, and relatively useful
Uh,
for
I don't
for
see you.
rote
I don't
tasks.
see you in the channel.
No, I don't. I don't use the Discord version because I actually use it for intended purposes, not to try to get it to say slurs. Uh,
I mean, I ask you real questions.
yeah.
What? All your questions are too embarrassing, though.
No, no, no. I use it. I use it for like long. I used to try to get it to teach me stuff, and I try to. So like recently, what have I done? I've asked it for recipe ideas. Like I give it a list of ingredients I have,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and
that's a good
I asked it
use.
to list recipe ideas. I asked it a bunch of questions about taxes and investment stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, all of it's stuff that would be easy to find more or less, but sometimes the way you frame the question, it forces it to frame an answer that isn't that easy to find, unless you
Yes,
can
exactly.
quickly cross-reference everything right at once. So yeah,
Yep.
that part is really cool. Like I've been asking a lot of animal questions that aren't just
Hmm.
like
Yep.
straightforwardly presented on Wikipedia or whatever.
It's sort of like if you Google a question, it
Hmm.
gives you the answer that you expected to give, not a page with 3 pages of somewhat related information to your question. Right. That's that is sort of the new step compared to where we exist because Google works on AI too. It works on the same principles.
Does Google search actually distinguish if you're writing a question versus just putting in other words?
Sort of. It doesn't distinguish the way a human would,
Okay.
but it does. There are some uh, there are some features that populate different outputs depending on how the question is phrased. It tries to kind of take in semantic information from the way the question is phrased.
Oh,
So in the
okay.
past, the best way to use Google was just to throw keywords at it. Like
Hmm.
instead of asking like how to make Babby, it would be like Babby make method or
Instructions.
whatever.
Yeah.
And that's no longer quite the same. It does make it has some understanding of the way the question is framed, but not as much.
Hey, whatever.
Uh,
Do Boolean operators work anymore?
I think they still work. Yeah, I think they still work.
Okay. That used to be the smart way to search.
Yeah, that's probably whenever you went to SEO school, you learned.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be back with a part 2 of Hidden Mechanics. It's exciting times here at Open Betas, the podcast.
Yep. Alrighty. See you
See ya.
next time.